allegedly stabbing his wife multiple times over the weekend. The incident occurred at a private student residence in Belhar. For SAFM News, I am Luyanda Maume. Headlines at 6:30.
A very good morning to you. In your SFM sports headlines, Cricket World Cup as we build up to the Proteas taking on Australia. The captain, Temba Bavuma, has been spotted training despite injury concerns. And in football, Gianni Infantino, the FIFA president, has hailed the positive impact of the African Football League. We'll find out more just before 6:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Very good morning. Good start on the roads around Gauteng. But if you're around Joburg, Midrand, just keep your eyes open ahead for maybe some debris on the roads after a massive hailstorm moved through the region last night. Very dramatic. It may just have left some trees down, some branches down, those sort of obstructions to watch for. Durban, Pietermaritzburg, either way, up to Pietermaritzburg, down to Durban, looking fine, no problems there. Cape Town, a little bit of pressure into inbound this morning, just moving between the airport and the Unsmuts Drive exit, perhaps not unusual. Looks like just volume of traffic building on your way to the city centre. And if you're driving Eastern Cape today, there are three massive wind turbine blades being moved from Crannock up the N10 onto the N9 to Newport. They're very long, very difficult to get past, and they're travelling at about 30 kilometres now. So it's going to be a disruptive morning, setting off from 7 a.m. up that N10 and N9 route. Just watch for that and some possible hold-ups in their wake. I'm Rob Byrne. SAFM Sunrise starts now.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
Good morning. If you go past one of those wind turbines, keep your wind to yourself if you don't mind. You get it? Good morning. You're with SAFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. I was driving home yesterday, and I don't know if you saw this. This was in Joburg. You know, KZN has flooding, the Eastern Cape has flooding, Cape Town has flooding, Gauteng gets hail. And so there I am in my relatively small car with my daughter. She's 11. Just picked her up. It's around 6:30, 6:35 in the afternoon. She gets in the car, very cheerful, very happy. Dad, we did this. Dad, we did that. Do you know what I got today? And then, suddenly, literally as we pull out of the parking lot where we are, there wasn't even a thunderclap or anything like that. Just suddenly, doof, 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 doof. And what's that stuff on the roof? Hail on the roof. It was huge. It was massive. It was relentless. It went on and on and on. And then she was like, Dad, I think maybe we need to pull over. I was like, you know what, my girl, you are right. So you pull over. All we could find was a tree, by the way, and we sat there. So then we tried to talk to each other, which you can't do because it's just so loud. And you've got this doof, doof, doof on the roof. And there's that terrible moment where you're sort of looking at your windscreen thinking, is this going to be all right? You know, are we okay here? And we can't get out. Where do we go? I mean, you get clapped and properly clapped. And there's some guy, I mean, honestly, what he was trying to do, moving a generator and a borehole excavator. I mean, a small sort of, you know, land mover or whatever, bulldozer, I suppose, on a truck in front of us. I'm like, dude, just stop. Let's just wait this out. Fine. So then fine. And we eventually decide we're going to go a little bit. And we go. And we come to this sort of thing where we're going down quite a main road, you know, Jan Smuts and Joburg. And it's downhill, right? So the water is whooshing down. And you know when the water is so deep that it's sort of white on the top, right? And your car is so slippery because it's ice. You're driving on hail. Now, for my daughter, this is very exciting because this is like snow. Dad, look, it's snow. It's not really snow. It's actually quite scary. Maybe we should have stayed under the tree where we were. So you're driving and you know, the car's fogged up and you've got the fan going and the aircon going and you've got the as the windscreen when the back one, you know, those noises. And so you're going very slowly and you come to this intersection and you stop and you still stuff going on the roof and on the windscreen. And you think, if I turn left here, am I going to be okay? You know, going down a hill, lots of water. I think, but if I stop, that's probably worse, right? My friend who's into 4x4s always tells me, if you're not sure, stay in second and go very slowly. If you're not sure, just stay in second, go very slowly. Okay, so we do the second, go in second very slowly. And then as we're about to cross what I think is going to be the scariest part of this, which is a bridge over a river down by Jan Smuts Drive in Joburg, there was silence. The hail stopped. The windscreen, was the only noise left. Fan was still going, of course, but the windscreen suddenly cleared. There was no more hail. And slowly, as we crossed the bridge, my daughter turns to me and says, "That was exciting, Dad." I thought for a minute she was going to say, "Let's do it again," but she didn't. But it was like, wow, quite an experience. We get home, and my wife says, "Well, there's been no hail here." Nothing here. It was such a bizarre moment. And I told there was damage to some hotels last night in Joburg. And if you were outside, I think it was really very scary. As I say, in Gauteng you get hail. In other places you get flooding. I suppose the hail leads to flooding. But it was quite a thing. I don't know if you got stuck in it last night, if you've had experiences like that in a car, you know. One of the sort of family stories our family tells is my mom in a tiny car, an old Mini, and water coming up to past the window. Very scary, you know. So I'm sure you've had stories like that. Anyway, lots going on yesterday. The story that I think developed overnight was Panyaza Lesufi responding to the reporting in Daily Maverick about what he had said about a minister. "Minister, your days are numbered over the crime wardens." Remember, we spoke a bit about it yesterday. We spoke to Mbazima Shaloa about it yesterday. And now Panyaza Lesufi issuing a statement saying he apologizes and takes full responsibility for the comments. He said he noted with disappointment there was sort of slicing of the audio, which I don't see that in the video. It seemed to me like a clear video that emerged on TikTok. Anyway, he says that he'll urgently seek a meeting with the ministers concerned, which, as far as I know, was Becky Clele, the police minister, and perhaps Ronald Lamola, the justice minister, to deal with all of this. Either way, there's a very interesting story that's developing here. Someone we're chasing this morning, and I understand, in fact, they were, because of the timing of things yesterday, we haven't actually heard from Cope yet here on SFM, or Colleen Makabele, who's technically still the Speaker of Joburg, but she's going to be fired. Cope saying that she'll be fired. She's a proportional representation councillor, so they have the power to fire her. There doesn't have to be a by-election or anything, just the next person goes in. And that's because she seems to be part of a new party called the SA Rainbow Alliance. And so if she's removed as a councillor, no longer Speaker in the city of Joburg, and this is where it gets complicated, because what could happen next is that you end up then having a new Cope councillor who could then start negotiations with members of the sort of various coalitions in Joburg and decide, you know, could end up changing the balance of power, because the Cope was with the sort of DA Action SA side of things. Colleen Makabele went with the ANC EFF side of things, if I can call it that. And so very intriguing to see how all of that's going to develop. Other politics going on at the moment. Fikile Mbalula, the Secretary General of the ANC, he was speaking at an event in the Free State. News 24 says that he told ANC members not to support state capture accused people when they go to court. He also said that people who are in the ANC, who are implicated in state capture, who did not go to the Integrity Committee, will now go before the National Disciplinary Committee. I have to tell you, I remember the Reverend Frank Chikane telling us this is what he wanted to do, but that was months ago, long time ago. So I'm afraid to say I'm going to sort of wait a little bit before I see if that actually happens. And then the other big story this morning and yesterday, the Gauteng Partnership Fund releasing that investigation report into the loans, the money they gave, I think it was 7.2 million rand to Ncebe Nonkwelo, who is the son-in-law of the Deputy President Paul Mashatile. And it's interesting because the report says that Mashatile had nothing to do with it, but there's still huge problems with the loans. They didn't do due diligence. They didn't try and get the money back. The money clearly shouldn't have been paid in the first place from what we can see. And Mashatile, as I understand it, actually lives in a house, what's it, a 37 million rand a building owned by Ncebe Nonkwelo. So the Deputy President, if I've got this right, lives in a house paid for and owned by someone who should not have received these loans. That seems to be the upshot. But Mashatile wasn't involved in the granting of the loans. That seems to be the situation at the moment. Well, you know how to get in touch with us this morning. 086 000 2032. Your SMS 41391. Tweet us FM Radio. That's Stephen Grootes. Send your WhatsApp voice notes to 0614104107. Good morning, Tuesday morning. It's 6:15.
No matter how much you plan, sometimes life happens. And when life happens, there's Cash Converters Cash Advance Loan. Our 30-day cash advance loan allows you to take care of those unexpected surprises. Simply bring in your items such as jewelry, tech and more. We'll keep it safe and you'll walk out with some much-needed cash. Plus, stand a chance to win 20,000 Rand every week. So, visit a Cash Converters store today. T's and C's apply. Cash Converters, we buy, we sell, we loan cash.
Pakishani. We are going to Durban when Bafana face Burn in the FIFA 2026 World Cup qualifiers. On Saturday, 18 November at the Moses Mabhida Stadium. Gates open at 12 p.m. and tickets are available for 50 Rand for adults and 20 Rand for children at Ticket Pro. Come dressed in your national colors to support Bafana to win prizes. If you are not in Durban, catch the game on SABC 1 at 3 p.m. Also available on sabcsport.com.
The Daily News Diary on SAFM.
Leander Maome, good morning. How are you doing?
Stephen, I'm good. I must say, my day yesterday was less dramatic than yours.
Well, there's always drama in my day. It's not my fault.
I agree. Drama follows you, right?
Indeed, yes. Very dramatic.
Most definitely. No. Like I said, in my house, excuse me, none of the storm.
Really?
I only saw it on social media. I was
Sure.
like, okay, I think I live in a different city.
As I say, literally as I crossed the bridge of the river, it stopped. Literally, boom. Just there, nothing more. Yeah.
The perils of living in Joburg, or
Indeed.
is it advantages?
Yes.
Stephen, the IEC today will be briefing the Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs on their readiness for the voter registration weekend for the weekend of the 18th and 19th November 2023. Of course, it's in preparation for those landmark elections next year.
And we talked yesterday about younger people in voting, and that's a big problem in all democracies, but I think becoming a bigger problem in ours.
Very curious to know what the stats are for the young people, and considering what has been happening in universities, where young people seem to have, taken politics quite seriously of late. And also the newly appointed Public Protector Advocate Koleka Kalega and other senior execs from the PPSA will address the Cape Town Press Club. Now the discussion is set to focus on the Public Protector as an institution being fit for purpose 28 years since it opened its doors for service. Let's find out what happens in that one.
Do you think the PP will get a question about PP?
Of course. Of course. Why not? I'll be surprised if they don't.
Yes.
And also, Stephen, the trial within a trial on the admissibility of confession statements and pointing out of crime scenes will continue in the Senzo Meiwa Meda trial at the High Court in Pretoria. You would remember that Judge Ratamokwatleng has ruled that the vehicle tracking data will be submitted as evidence at the trial within a trial. Let's find out what happens there today.
These things, they're important, but they take forever.
Of course they do. And also, do you bring in an expert, or does the person who's currently on the stand explain this? Do they actually have the expertise to explain tracking devices and how they work, and they're able to stand behind that information?
And what I don't get is that if it turns out that their confessions are admitted, which means the stories about them being assaulted are lies, which is what they would be.
Yes.
What does that mean for the rest of the trial and how their testimony is seen later by the court?
Absolutely. Very important in how the defense will be leading their evidence going forward, because, if you remember some of the expert testimonies that their fingerprints were not found at the crime scene. And there's so many things. So let's find out what happens on this one, Stephen. And also, Stephen, a very sad story. The funeral service for Dr. Bakang Musadi from the Dr. George Mukari Academic Hospital in the north of Pretoria, who was gunned down in broad daylight at his home, will be happening today. And of course, we'll also be checking on the progress of the police investigation on this case, because, the killing of doctors is just one of those things that are highly, highly unusual, particularly in broad daylight. It's
a very strange story.
Very strange story. And finally, Stephen, Statistics South Africa will be releasing the quarter labour force survey today. Now, South Africa's official unemployment rate for the second quarter was 32.6% from 32.9% in the previous quarter. So let's see what those numbers look like in this particular quarter.
Yeah, I wouldn't prepare for good news, I'm afraid.
Me too, Stephen. Me too. My pessimism is high this morning. Thank you, Stephen.
Luanda Maome, thank you very much indeed. Good morning. You're with SAFM. We'll be listening on the radio. It's 20 minutes after 6.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
Let's have a look at your weather around the country this morning. Tshwane, partly cloudy, isolated showers and thundershowers, 15 and 25. Johannesburg, partly cloudy, isolated showers, thundershowers, 13 and 24. Vereeniging, partly cloudy, isolated showers, thundershowers, 14 and 25. Bombela, cloudy, isolated showers, thundershowers, 13 and 17. Polokwane, cloudy, 15 and 19. Mahakeng, fine, becoming partly cloudy, 17 and 30. Vryburg, fine, 17 and 34. Mangung, fine, becoming partly cloudy, 13 and 30. Kimberley fine 16 and 32. Uppington fine 20 and 37. Cape Town fine, a light and variable wind, 18 and 32. George, partly cloudy at first, otherwise fine, a moderate to fresh easterly 12 and 24. Gqeberha, partly cloudy at first, otherwise fine, a light to moderate northeasterly 15 and 22. East London cloudy in the morning, otherwise fine, a light easterly wind 14 and 22. eThekwini cloudy, isolated showers and rain, a moderate southwesterly 16 and 22. Richards Bay cloudy, isolated showers, rain, moderate southwesterly wind 17 and 23. And Pietermaritzburg, morning fog, otherwise cloudy, isolated showers and rain 11 and 17.
SFM invites you to our inaugural public lecture, delivered by the former Chief Justice, Mogoeng. The theme of the lecture is constitutionalism and upholding the rule of law in South Africa. Has corruption and malfeasance eroded the moral fabric of the democratic dispensation? The lecture will take place on the 29th of November 2023 at the SABC M1 Studios in Johannesburg. Secure your seat by emailing us at info@safm.co.za.
SAFM, leading the conversation. Worldview Update, bringing you closer to international or global news.
In Gaza, the United Nations now says that 700,000 Palestinian children have been displaced and forced to move, leaving everything they know behind them. Meanwhile, in the Al Shufa hospital, the Israeli Defense Force is ordering everyone to leave the complex. They say there's a Hamas command node underground underneath the hospital. From what I understand, both Hamas and doctors at the hospital deny that. Doctors at the hospital say they're refusing to leave because there are 700 at-risk patients in the institution who will die if they leave. Professor Abel Eersterhuizen is a professor of strategy at the Faculty of Military Science at the University of Stellenbosch. Professor Eersterhuizen, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
The situation around the hospital would appear to show the worst parts of urban warfare, what you've been warning about. You have a hospital, you have patients inside who need medical treatment. Israel claims they're Hamas members underneath. From what I can see, there's no good way this ends.
No, absolutely not. And the sad part here is that it is absolutely impossible for us standing outside, to pick up on this narrative and to get an idea of who is actually speaking the truth and what is actually going on at present. Because this is the sad part here, both Israel and Hamas in this war have a good cause to fight for, and it's so difficult to understand precisely what is going on. And we are, in a way, now the victims of propaganda from both sides of the war here. So I'm at the moment very, very cautious in making any deductions and in finding the truth here.
Israel keeps pushing people south. It keeps saying they must go south. It's not necessarily that safe in the south of Gaza. We've seen so much speculation that it wants to push people out of Gaza into the Sinai Desert, into Egypt. And this comes to a point that you made, Professor, which has stuck with me at the very beginning of this. What is Israel's actual end? In other words, what does it want to achieve through all of this? And I keep coming back to that question because it still is a mystery to me. And if we understood that, we would kind of understand so much more. But could there be any other strategy other than what many people are suggesting, which is that they want to that Israel wants to push Palestinians out of Gaza into the desert?
Well, I don't think Israel is deliberately targeting civilians here. I think that's a point we have to make. And at the same time, Gaza is one of the most highly populated areas in the world. And in some way or another, you want to avoid, and this is the predicament Israel is sitting with, they want to avoid civilian casualties. So what do? Egypt don't want to take the Palestinians. They don't want to open their border. So the only option open for Israel, in a way, is to try and move the civilians out of the direct operational areas. And that's a difficult thing to do if you keep in mind that perhaps Hamas, and I'm not saying this is the case, but Hamas is perhaps trying to achieve the opposite, to keep the civilians in the areas, because Hamas survival to some extent is rooted in staying amongst the population. That's precisely what revolutionary forces have been doing throughout the ages. They hide between the population. So it is a case here of both Israel and Hamas ought to carry responsibility for what is unfolding here. And yeah, in terms of the end state for Israel, it's, in my opinion, twofold. Israel is definitely trying to erode as much of Hamas's fighting capability as possible, and at the same time, it is the tunnel network, in my opinion, that have created the disequilibrium between Israeli and Hamas forces. It's the only area where Hamas really had an advantage, and I think Israel is trying to deal with that advantage so as not to empower Hamas in future conflicts again.
Professor Abel Eerstehuizen, thank you very much indeed. Professor of Strategy at the Faculty of Military Science at the University of Stellenbosch. 27 minutes after 6.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning.
Good morning.
Everyone looking ahead to Thursday, the World Cup semi-final against Australia. How's Temba Bavuma?
Well, he's received quite a boost. He had optional training yesterday and he decided to have it. He trained without any pain, and this is looking ahead to that semi-final against Australia. Bavuma's men will take on Australia for a place in Sunday's final. The captain had tweaked his hamstring in the Proteas' win over Afghanistan last week, and there was a real fear he wouldn't recover in time for the semi-final. Now, with the Proteas twice losing the previous times, the two teams have played in a World Cup semi-final. That's the Proteas as well as Australia. Critics already predicting that they will lose again this time round. However, cricket analyst Aslam Kota believes anything can happen.
The South African team are in a good space, that if we didn't have a good start, the other guys would come up and score the runs, they'll deliver. So it's a team that's playing for each other. It's a team that's working hard for each other. And I think at the back of the mind, just as much as the rugby players have had over the last, say, 15 years, is that they know they're playing for the people back home. And whilst that may be a bit of pressure, I do think that they are very well mentally handled, well held mentally by the management. And it just seems that they've grown into a very good unit.
That's cricket commentator and analyst for the SABC, Aslam Kota. Soccer now. FIFA President Gianni Infantino has hailed the positive impact of the African Football League as Mamelodi Sundowns were crowned the inaugural champions. The side defeated Wydad Athletic Club 2-0 in the final to take the victory in front of 50,000 people to lift the AFL trophy.
This is what African football needs, the best playing together more often in a top professional environment. That's what we are doing with the African Football League. I'm very proud of this collaboration between FIFA and CAF. So my thanks go to Patrice Motsepe, his entire team, our FIFA team as well, who has contributed to this. And we can see football brings joy, brings happiness, but we're seeing on the field of play as well, brings a lot of quality for Africa and for the world.
And moving on to some other soccer news elsewhere, former Arsenal, Chelsea and Barcelona midfielder Cesc Fabregas has been named interim manager of the Italian side Como. He played 17 times for the Serie B side last season, and that was before retiring from playing and becoming coach of their youth as well as their reserve teams. And finally, golf news. Hei Ran Yu has won the 2023 Louis Suggs Rolex Rookie of the Year award. The 22-year-old from South Korea clinched the honor after tying for 12th at the Anika tournament, and that took place over the weekend. And that's a wrap of your sport on Sunrise. We'll bring you more headlines top of the hour. For SFM, I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thank you very much indeed. In the next half an hour or so, we'll try and get to the bottom of what is going on at Gold One. More protests there, that mine outside Springs. Remember those workers who didn't come up? They were held hostage, we were told, underground. Well, more on that in the next half hour. You're with SFM leading the conversation. Stage 1 now, Stage 3 later at 6:30.
Thank you, Stephen. In your headlines, the EFF says its national elections campaign is gaining traction among voters just a few months after its launch. The party held an elections meeting in Kempton Park in the east of Johannesburg yesterday. The University of the Western Cape says it has suspended the 30-year-old student who was arrested for allegedly stabbing his wife multiple times over the weekend. The incident occurred at a private student residence in Belhar. And in a foreign policy speech in London, the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has urged Israel to do everything possible to protect civilians, including those in hospitals. In these toughest comments yet on the conflict, Sunak has called for an urgent humanitarian pause in the fighting, but stopped short of asking for a ceasefire. I'll have details on these and other stories at 7.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
It's not a bad start on Joburg's roads this morning. The Mike 1, though, queuing up coming through from Gold Reef City up through Crown towards the Schmidt Street exit in Braamfontein. Braamfontein, one of the areas hard hit with the big hailstorm last night. So just maybe some debris to watch for there. Also Midrand, another sort of area that you may get some trees down, branches down after the hailstorm event last night as well. N1 South in Pretoria just starting to backlog to the R21 roadworks. It's backing up to Rigel Avenue. Yesterday at its worst, it was back as far as Stormful, just shortly after you join from Montana. So as we remind you, go early. The earlier, the better these days. Cape Town looks like being a busy Tuesday, running to the city centre. The N1 already busy from the R300 to Sable Road, and there's queues on the N2 inbound at Khayelitsha, approaching the R300, and more queues from the airport through to Mowbray Main Road. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The business update on SAFM.
Ray McClark, good morning.
Good morning. Hi there.
Asian markets, US markets, how are they looking?
Well, both markets are mostly up. Consumer inflation data for October in the US will be released later today. And most economists expect the inflation rate to have increased to 3.3%. The US Central Bank typically wants the inflation rate to be below 2%. The bank has warned that interest rates may have to increase further because consumer inflation remains high. So US markets closed on a lower footing yesterday, and before US markets officially open, Nasdaq, Dow Jones and S&P futures are each up 0.1% this morning. In Asian markets, Japan's Nikkei is up 0.5%. China's Shanghai Composite is up 0.2%, and Hong Kong's Hang Seng is down 0.1%, and the dollar to the rand is 18.73.
And Moody's is placing Transnet credit ratings on review for a downgrade.
Yeah, essentially, credit rating agency Moody's believes that Transnet is at high risk of defaulting on its debt repayments and obligations. Transnet has debt worth 135 billion rand. Moody's has now placed Transnet's credit rating on review for a downgrade, saying its debt situation is quite worrying. Downgrading Transnet will make lenders more wary about lending the company more money. Transnet has debt worth 10 billion rand that it has to pay back by the end of December. However, Transnet is in negotiations with lenders to repay this debt at a later stage.
And Vodacom's pumping 4.8 billion rand into its South African network.
Yeah, Vodacom spent this money between the 1st of April and the 30th of September this year. The 4.8 billion rand was invested into initiatives to make Vodacom's network more resilient during Eskom blackouts. Vodacom kitted its cell phone towers with solar power, generators, and lithium batteries so that they can continue functioning during Eskom blackouts. And this year alone, Vodacom would have spent 11 billion rand.
Ray McClark, thank you very much indeed. Ray, of course, back in an hour. More business news through the day here on SAFM.
Africa Update on SAFM Sunrise, a continental overview of current African affairs.
South Africa, Tsipo Mantula, good morning.
Mr. Vova, refreshing morning and Jumbo Africa to the listeners.
In Liberia, in Monrovia, Western African leaders led by the former president of Nigeria, Goodluck Jonathan, they're looking at the process in Liberia. There's that election runoff.
That is quite true, Stephen. We have this presidential runoff today in Liberia, Monrovia, Good luck, Jonathan Stephen, leading what they call the West Africa Elders Forum. He's accompanied by Kadra Odrago, the former Prime Minister of Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. They are there, Stephen, because you'll understand the last elections on the 10th of October didn't have an outright winner. It is a neck-to-neck between George Weah and Joseph Boakai. We know that was a slight 126 votes between the two candidates. So today is the presidential runoff in Monrovia. We know the former soccer player George Weah Stephen is facing the veteran elder, but others are saying the young people are gravitating towards the former soccer player, and Joseph Boakai, being a former deputy president, but also a veteran politician, is also gunning on the alliance for the vote for the coming elections today in Liberia.
And then in Madagascar and Antananarivo, the president, Andre Rajoelina, difficult path to re-election.
Difficult part, Stephen. We know that there have been some controversy. Yesterday, when we could not connect, Stephen, there was a concern from the lower house member of parliament and the speaker who was raising this issue of suspending elections. But the law there doesn't allow, Stephen. But also what is important, SADC sending the former general from Zambia, Godfrey Miyanda, as the head of the observer mission in Madagascar. We are talking about countdown, Stephen, for within 48 hours, Antananarivo will have to decide on the presidential elections. The current president, even a young DJ Rajoelina Stephen, is expecting to change many things in that country since he was in power in 2013. But as you know, Stephen, there have been issues around the citizenship of this candidate Rajoelina from other 11 presidential candidates.
And then in the DRC, the Independent National Electoral Commission chair, Dennis Kadiba, he says they're ready.
Stephen said they are ready after meeting with 26 candidates in the capital city, Kinshasa, in DRC. Remember, their electoral commission, Stephen, with a French acronym, we call it CENI, is the Congo Independent National Electoral Commission. Dennis Kadima used to be in South Africa, Stephen, working on the Electoral Institute of Southern Africa. He's an experienced, what I'll call electoral expert. But he says that they have to organize what he calls credible, transparent, inclusive, and peaceful elections. We are talking of the 20th of December next month, Stephen, that DRC will have to decide. They are saying, Stephen, it's 43.9 million people who are registered to vote. We know the population of Congo, Stephen, is very high, but come the 20th of December, DRC decides.
And then in Gabon, the military government that overthrew the president, Ali Bongo Ndima, they say there'll be elections in August 2025. That's a long time away.
It might be long time, Stephen, but look at the Sahel. It's our template. It's our script. When you look at the Sahel region, that Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea-Conakry, they've delayed. But General Brice Oligui Nguema, like we have said before, from father to son to the cousin, he have said that their timetable is around when they have a national conference next year, Stephen. According to their timetable, is that they will have a national conference where they will decide now on this election date that they've pronounced, that come the 2025 August, they will hold the presidential and legislative elections in Libreville, Gabon.
And then in our archives this day, 14th of November, 1922.
Stephen, he will have been 101 years old, but he died at the age of 93. We are talking of a UN Secretary General, the sixth, coming from Africa, from Egypt, Cairo, Boutros Ghali, who was born on this day. A diplomat par excellence, a deputy minister of Foreign Affairs, visiting South Africa in 1996, during that time when he engaged with Nelson Mandela. Also, not agreeing with France and USA, Stephen, if one can think about his diplomatic thinking. He was part of the Camp David Accords between Egypt and Israel in 1979. And finally, Stephen, you know his famous quote, despite that we still have an oil conflict in Africa, but we have a great renaissance conflict of the water between Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia, when he said, the Middle East conflict will be around water, but not the oil or the politics. Asante Sana SG, as we're still leading the conversation, SAFM.
Russ Advocate Sipho Mantula, thank you. Back, of course, tomorrow. More news from our continent through the day. 21 minutes now to 7.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Well, plenty going on. Damage caused by the hail in Joburg. Other issues, of course, at the moment. We'll update you on the situation around the Grootes On mine. You to speak to AMCU in a little while. And then also Tembi and Kadameng, the Cooperative Governance Minister, Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, I should say, talking about coalitions. There's so much to look at there, especially with Colleen Makobele in the news, as you can imagine. Bramoro's on the line from Mangung. Bramoro, hi. The immigration white paper announced by the minister over the weekend. How do you actually see it?
Thank you for the good show. Honestly, we need to embrace the new regulation in the Immigration Act because perhaps this is the gateway that is going to maybe direct most of us into the mainstream visa acquisition process. But Stephen, in doing so, can you please place a call to the Department of Home Affairs and question them why they are failing to issue backlog visa application way back 4 or 5 years ago? Some are even pending for 8 years. It's unfortunate that people who are even qualified to be granted permanent residence are still waiting for feedback from Home Affairs. And these people are currently illegal in the country because their applications are not yet approved. The banks are still closing their accounts. Their employees are restricting their movement, especially in workplace. The crime that they have committed is submitting the application to Home Affairs, which has taken more than a year. The maximum is supposed to be a year. We have many Ghanaians in South Africa who have good cause. They've never been involved in a single crime, and all the applications are still pending. So at the end of the day, if a South African knows Bramoro has already submitted my application and is not yet approved, this person has every right to call me illegal, as long as I'm not yet approved, because I can be rejected. Whereas if the application is being rejected, it wasn't as a result of my inability to renew on time, but the decision of Home Affairs to delay the renewal process. If you are able to do that, fast track it, yes, that calls for me to go for a review or probably leave the country in good faith. So please, humbly, we can only rely on you to do this for us. Please, if possible, get the minister in the studio for us to continue, especially on the backlog applications.
Yeah, Bramoro, I know the minister himself said the current system is just unworkable, and I think you're pointing to that. At the same time, if you start a process, I know there's a law, PAJA and all the rest, if you start a process, you actually have to continue with the process. You can't just stop it. You actually have to finish the process. So I think there's something there that we need to look at. So let's see if we can sort of do that. But Bramoro, it's very difficult when the minister himself says the system isn't working. Well, I mean, I think that there's a big failure there. So I think that's a big issue that we need to look at. Well, we'll continue to take your calls on this, of course, on 086 000 2032. We saw the big hailstorm yesterday, and also the issue around, and I find this fascinating, around Congress of the People in Colleen Makobele, who is now going to, we understand, be fired as a COPE councillor. And she is a proportional representation councillor, so she can just be fired. And then I presume is no longer the speaker in the city of Joburg. We'll try and track her down and speak to her before the end of the show. Otherwise, hear from COPE as well. There's so many different ways of actually looking at all of this morning. 17 minutes now to 7 the time.
The award-winning SAFM playwriting competition is back.
I remember a time when my grandmother, she would make sure that she never missed that story.
SAFM invites all writers to explore the medium of sound.
I mean, I remember Pipito, she remember all of those. It's like, what is this?
Yeah.
It was fiction.
The theater of the mind. And to create a 1-hour radio play in English, get writing now and submit your play before the 22nd of January 2024. For more information, visit safm.co.za.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
17 minutes to 7. More protests by workers at the Gold One mine in Springs. The union AMCU, they say that people there want their union to be recognized by the mine's management. 2 weeks ago, you may remember, it was around 500 workers. They didn't come up from underground after their shift. Management and the National Union of Mine Workers said that AMCU members were holding them hostage. AMCU said that workers were staying underground out of their own choice as a sit-in against management. Now it seems all of this is flaring up again. The Joburg Central Regional Secretary for AMCU is Claudia Mokwena. Claudia, good morning. Thanks for talking to us this morning.
Good morning, Stephen, and good morning to your listeners.
What are you demanding from the management at the mine? What do you want from them?
Look, remember at this point, AMCU has to follow all the processes in terms of Section 21, including the conditions in the closed shop agreement. AMCU seeks to be recognized at Gold One. However, workers have taken the struggle into their own hands because Currently, they are compelled to be members of NUM in terms of the closure agreement. So therefore, workers are saying they need to be represented by AMCO.
How many members are now belonging to your union at that mine? How many miners now belong to you?
So in terms of the numbers, Stephen, I can simply confirm that Grootes On employs 1,870 workers within the bargaining unit. AMCO has recruited over 1,750 workers in that bargaining unit.
So there are only 50 people who don't belong to AMCU, you say?
Look, numbers don't lie. I mean, you have been seen throughout, even through the demonstration, through the meetings we've been having previously. You could see that numbers are looking to belong to AMCO. NUM has been conducting interviews and so forth, but you couldn't see their members that they are alleging they are representing.
Have you got every single signature, 1,750 signatures, proving that these people now have decided, that these workers have decided to join AMCU?
We do have those numbers in terms of the membership forms that those workers have signed.
So what I don't understand is you still deny that people were being held hostage underground last week. And in fact, I mean, if you look at it on the evidence, that must have been the case. People do not stay underground voluntarily, Clady. So the reason I ask this is that if you felt you had to hold people hostage last week, how can we now believe that 1,750 people out of 1,800 have decided to join you and signed up?
How is it possible that members of NUM can hold themselves hostage? And again, why would AMCO workers hold themselves hostage? Workers decided to stage a sit-in.
Some of your members have been charged by the mine management for that.
We understand that there are workers who have been charged. Some have been suspended. That we understand. However, currently, Stephen, you need to understand at this point, all those workers are NUM members. In terms of the closure agreement, in terms of the deduction, in terms of the recognition agreement that the company has with NUM.
Claudia Mokoena, thank you. The Joburg Central Regional Secretary for AMCU, Victor Ngwane, is the Gauteng Regional Organizer for the NUM. Victor, good morning. AMCU says that out of 1,800 workers at this mine, in that bargaining unit, they've signed up 1,750 of them. Do you accept that number?
Thank you very much. In actual fact, that's the most contradicting statement ever, because if we have been following AMCO at its national level, it has been dismissing and clarifying the position that they do not have members there yet, as per the processes that must be followed. Now, you found those on the ground, they are busy claiming all these sort of numbers and doing things contrary to what they should have been doing. Because AMCO clearly knows the processes. They did recruit early this year. Instead of following your Section 26 processes, they opted for your Section 21 processes, which led them to CCMA and ultimately obtaining a certificate to strike, which was interdicted. They continued anyway with illegal strikes. Because if they are indeed claiming those numbers, why are they not patient enough to follow the legal processes?
How many members do you have at this mine?
1,921 in the bargaining unit that they are claiming. Legally and otherwise, they are all NUM members until due processes have been followed. AMCO stop orders have been verified and maybe ultimately given organizational rights.
Okay.
All those members are NUM members. What that guy is saying is just gambling with people's jobs and people's lives. Because if he's claiming that there was no hostage situation, why were people injured? Why were people then hospitalized after coming from underground? If you are saying those people are joining AMCO freely, why are people's cars bent? Why are shacks bent? Why are people forced to come and participate in that demonstration, which has been interdicted by the Code of Law anyway, to say they are not supposed to be doing that?
Okay, the numbers just clearly don't add up. AMCU says it's 1,800 people in the bargaining unit. You say it's 1,921.
I'm speaking from a factual point as a recognized trade union within that particular mine, that all the 1,921 members in the categories A and B are legally and otherwise NUM members.
Victor Ngwane, I'm going to put you on hold once again. I think we probably are going to say goodbye. Thank you. The Gauteng regional organizer at the NUM. Normally, we sort of try and do one side, and move on from there. But Claudia Mokwena from AMCU is still on hold. And Claudia, I'm presuming you heard what your colleague, do I say rival from the NUM just said. He asked the question, why are people's shacks being burnt? Why are cars being burnt? Let me put the question to you directly. Is AMCU using intimidation at this mine?
Again, I just need to clarify this point. AMCU is not on any protest. Members of NUM legally are on protest. Why is NUM not able to reprimand its members? I mean, we were interdicted. We understand. We are following the legal processes. So therefore, AMCU can be shooting that point.
Then why were police using stun grenades yesterday? Were they using them against themselves? Why were police using stun grenades yesterday? Wasn't it the people you say are your members who are protesting?
Workers are saying they need to be recognized as AMCU members.
Right, Claudia, you can hear it's very chaotic there. I think we're going to leave that for the moment. Right, Claudia Mokwena, thank you. The Joburg Regional Secretary, Organizer for AMCU, the Regional Secretary for the Centre of Joburg for AMCU. You heard also, of course, from the NUM there. Your view, 086 000 2032, 9 minutes to 7.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning. The N1 South in Pretoria, even worse this morning, heading down towards the R21 work zone with a stationary vehicle at Gauteng. So it's effectively two joined-up queues. So it's already queuing from the N4, Emma Highway, down towards the breakdown at Gauteng, and then from Gauteng all the way down to the R21. There's also load shedding in the Menlyn and Gauteng areas, Pretoria East, so routes like Solomon Mashlangu, Gauteng Road under some extra pressure this morning. Joburg's Mike 1 is heavy from Gold Reef City all the way through to the Smith Street exit. There is a bit of a pushback on the M2 West coming through from Joe Slovo to get through Crown and into that Mike 1. Durban side, the M2 already queuing both ways towards the work zone, north from the M7, south from Inanda Road, heading through Spaghetti Junction. The M7's queuing on your way to Pinetown. Looks like an issue before North Dean, and the Higginson Highway out of Chatsworth. Super heavy this morning. Queues from Bayview down through Havenside, Mabini, right towards the N2 before you're out of that one. Cape Town Marine Drive off to a busy start, busier earlier than normal by the feel of things there, from Bayside right through to Racecourse Road in the Milnerton area. And there's some queuing pressure on the N2 coming through Khayelitsha. Traffic just backing up from Spine Road through towards the R300. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
7 minutes to 7. Well, of course, news this morning. Colleen Makobele probably about to be removed as Joburg Speaker in that city because COPE is going to fire her as a proportional representation councillor. Meanwhile, consistent reporting over the last month or so that the ANC is considering to no longer work with the EFF and the Patriotic Alliance in places like Joburg or Ekurhuleni. Its own internal committee dealing with coalitions appears to believe the relationships are not working and are benefiting the EFF rather than the ANC. In the meantime, a series of comments in the last few days by the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, Thembi Nkadimeng, who seems to have said that she believes coalition administrations are leading to weaker services. In other words, coalitions are bad for service delivery. Well, the Minister herself joins us now. Minister Nkadimeng, good morning to you, ma'am, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Good morning to our listeners.
There's been a lot of talk about coalitions and services. Do you believe it is always the case? If you have a coalition, you'll have poorer services?
Not really. I mean, if you look into the first term, or rather the past term, 2016 to 2021, Ekurhuleni was in a coalition, achieved the first clean audit in its entire lifetime, twice in a row. And it was a coalition between two parties, of course, and two other three, so a total of about 3-4. And they were running, and they were able to deliver services. They were able to even account financially on what they have done, and they got a clean bill of health. You look into other areas. I mean, the city of eThekwini is not in the coalition for the first time. It started with a coalition. Of course, we were not discussing coalitions then. But of interest is that since the dawn of democracy, local government has produced hung councils, which we call coalitions, of course, today, where you wouldn't find an outright majority winner. And there will be a series of, in 2000 elections, there were 22 of such, 39 in the next, and etc. Of course, we experienced the shoot in 2016 when metros in the main. Now, the challenge here is which is what we're trying to legislate, is actually moving beyond where, look, outcomes of a hung council is a democratic process. There's nothing you can do about it. It's me and you going into the poll, exercising our right correctly so, and giving out an outcome. The challenge which we have here, which is not only synonymous with coalition, it's synonymous with instability, of which the main is coalition, which causes instability in some councils. Let's take Mangaung. They're not in a coalition, they're unstable. There's no service there. That's our point. Instability leads to lack of service delivery. Now you can count many of your coalitions because they're unstable politically and administratively. They don't even arrive at a discussion. What am I going to service Stephen with? Who pays my rates and taxes on a day-to-day basis? Very few coalitions have found the working mechanisms of political parties to respect one another, to be cordial, but to have agreements that are genuinely about citizens, about a charter to service you and me, which is what we have as a challenge.
So, Minister, you and I have spoken in the past here on SAFM Sunrise, and there's certain proposals, and I want to mention two of them because these are important. The one is raising the threshold to get into a council, which would reduce the number of parties in council, and to reduce the number of times you can bring a confidence motion, a motion of no confidence. And it seems to me that your party, the African National Congress, and the main opposition, the Democratic Alliance, both agree on those proposals. It may suit both of you, but never mind that. If you both agree, you would have enough votes in the National Assembly to pass that. There's an election next year after which you may no longer have the votes. Are you going to try and pass resolutions like that through the National Assembly before next year's election?
National Assembly program, the good thing about it, even all political parties know, follows certain processes and procedures which can't be short-circuited. The amendments will have to go for public participation. They'll have to go to the NCOP for ratification before going, because I remember a local government through the provinces which are represented in the NCOP, it's mandatory that the act passes it. So there's no rush. There's no issue that things are not going to be taken through the correct processes. But we have done studies. We are convinced, whether it's Party A or Party B, if you look into a city of eThekwini today, they will reduce by just the 1%. In other countries, I was joining the Dula Oma School of Local Government just last week or the other week, and we had a presentation from Spain where they were showing that they have got a 5% threshold. We're not introducing that high. We're saying 1%, just one, to say you are equally represented. But it will be of interest, Steve, one day that me and you look, our elections have passed in terms of local government in 2021, that you take and look in a ward that has got 9,000 people, for example, or residents or households that are within that voters roll. What is a fair representation really of me standing up and say, because I have got 300 votes out of 9,000, this poll is correct, no one can question it. I have got 10 numbers, Steve have got 2, so I'm the best. It also forces not only the political parties, but the communities themselves, because in local government, we service you closer. So you've got to take keen interest as a resident of whatever municipality to go out to the poll to really find the one you think will represent you best. And I don't think in today's democracy, 1% is cutting it too much.
In the ANC, and you're the Minister of Cooperative Governance, and I realise the ANC has different processes, but I must ask you this. We've all seen the public reporting suggesting that the ANC as a whole believes that it should no longer work with the EFF, and I realise different people in the ANC have different views on this. But the suggestion or the inference would be that the Gauteng province of the ANC is disobeying the national ANC by continuing in its working agreements with the EFF in Ekurhuleni and Joburg. Is it disobeying? Is it in discord with the national ANC here?
Well, I don't know of any disobedience really as a member of an ANC. Of course, the ANC will have to speak for itself here. But what I know is that there is a coalition framework that guides discussions that has been adopted by the NEC, and it indicates each and every province. Because you see, coalitions and provinces are not a one-size-fits-all. What happens in KwaZulu-Natal is slightly different than what will happen in Eastern Cape or Western Cape or anywhere else. So what the NEC did put a framework which allows provinces to lead in the discussions on how they are going to partner in the areas informed by the conditions that are prevailing within those municipalities and provinces. And Gauteng did the same. And of course, the coalition debate is constant. It's not static. It's not a one thing. It's dynamic. There are changes. There are motions of no confidence. I mean, when the framework was done, for example, in Nelson Mandela Bay, we were occupying a mayoral position. Today, we are a speaker. You have been reading in the news that possibly the Speaker of City of Johannesburg may be recalled. Maybe when the sun sets today, a coalition structure of the City of Johannesburg may change. So it requires constant discussion. And that is why we get into this issue of motion, which is the second suggestion. Sure. It's one thing when your party withdraws you. Yes, you don't have a ticket to stand on behalf of some. But you look into a motion of no confidence today. They're about, did state greet me? Do I occupy a position which has got a largest and a huge budget? It's also not in the interest of who we're servicing. It's actually not in the interest of servicing its citizens. So we are saying as COGTA, we will publicize in coalitions all IDPs. We need the agreement, coalition agreement between the parties in that municipality so that the community can hold them accountable, but at least have a window besides maybe cases of corruption, of non-service delivery, where there are tangible things which are against the law. Then you can place a motion of no confidence, but not haphazardly as it happens now.
Minister, I'm so sorry. We do have to end it there. Thank you very much indeed. You're with SFM leading the conversation just after 7 o'clock. Outsurance will go out of their way to try and save you money on your car insurance. If they can't, ask for 500 Rand. SMS out to 38462. Now that's good news.
Independent and impartial. This is SFM News.
Thank you, Stephen. In your top stories, the EFF says its election campaign is gaining traction and a UWC student suspended for allegedly stabbing his wife. This is SAFM News. A very good morning. I am Luyanda Maume. The EFF says its national elections campaign is gaining traction among voters just few months after its launch. The party held an elections meeting in Kempton Park in the east of Johannesburg yesterday. The one-day gathering reviewed the work that the party's volunteers have been doing since the launch of their campaign in July. EFF Deputy President is Floyd Shibambu.
The reality is that we are far much more stronger now than we ever have been as the EFF. Like, the ground is far much more ready for the elections of 2024. We've got representation in literally all the 4,364 wards of South Africa. We've got presence in all the 23,000 VDs, all the sub-regions, including in areas where we do not have councillors of the EFF. We've got solid presence. So we are at our strongest ever. Since the formation of the EFF, we are far much more ready to be giving proper election outcome in 2024.
The University of the Western Cape says it has suspended the 30-year-old student who was arrested for allegedly stabbing his wife multiple times over the weekend. The incident occurred at a private student residence in Belhar. The accused appeared in court yesterday. He faces a charge of attempted murder. His wife, who is a student at the Cape Peninsula University, is in a critical condition in hospital. UWC spokesperson Hassan Abada says the student has also been barred from all university residences associated with the UWC.
The University of the Western Cape is shocked and outraged at the incident that occurred at the weekend involving one of its students who has been arrested. We can confirm that an urgent rector's tribunal was called by the proctor of the university, and in attendance was the DVC Student Development and Support, who decided that the student be suspended.
Home Affairs Minister Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi says the country is facing a challenge of undocumented foreign nationals running spaza shops in villages. Dr. Motsoaledi revealed this during his visit in Oakley, Bushbuck Ridge, where 10 Home Affairs trucks have been brought to the area to assist the community with various services for the next 5 days. He met with the Mpumalanga House of Traditional Leaders chairperson Khoshila Mokwena. Motsoaledi says all spaza shop owners in villages must be known by the local chiefs.
All the mayors must take an audit of all the spaza shops in the country. All, anything that is called a spaza shop. I heard some people maliciously say, no, we want to audit only spaza shop of people from other countries. Without any spaza shop, you can't have a spaza shop that is unregistered. They must produce documents and register. Don't who have got no documents, who are illegal, we'll have to deport them. There's nothing we can do. Those who have got documents will register, and will also register them for tax.
COPE has terminated the membership of its speaker in the city of Johannesburg, Colleen Makubele. Makubele was seen in pictures of a new organization which COPE said was in breach of the party's constitution. She reportedly encouraged South Africans to vote in her capacity as chairperson of the South African Rainbow Alliance at the weekend. SARA is a voting bloc which was initially said to be the umbrella body for political parties that wanted to work with COPE next year ahead of the national elections. COPE president is Musiwa Lekota.
I cannot be worried about that. When you form a political party, you pursue, you say to the people what you want to do for them, and they vote you for you on the basis of what you promise them. Now, they are not married to you for life. In their own mind is a condition. If you don't do that which satisfies us, we are going to leave. And I'm not surprised at all. People come and go. As they grow older, they begin to see that some of the things that we thought were going to happen and so on do not happen.
The roof of the Southern Sun Rosebank Hotel in Johannesburg collapsed last night after a freak hailstorm. A preliminary report says no injuries were reported. Johannesburg Emergency Services spokesperson Robert Molaudzi says most areas around the city were affected.
Last night, in most parts of the city of Johannesburg, we experienced a hailstorm which affected mostly the areas like Bramfontein, Polshof, Midrand, Marlborough, Soweto, and of course Rosebank also, and the damages were mostly vehicles. Also, one of the hotels in Rosebank, I think it's Southern Sun Hotel, of which the roof collapsed, and then there were no casualties or people who were injured on that incident.
And finally, in a foreign policy speech in London, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has urged Israel to do everything possible to protect civilians, including those in hospitals. In his toughest comments yet on the conflict, Sunak called for an urgent humanitarian pause in the fighting, but stopped short of asking for a ceasefire.
They must take all measures to protect innocent civilians, including at hospitals, stop extremist violence in the West Bank, and allow more aid into Gaza. Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, described to me the terrible suffering of the Palestinian people. Too many civilians are losing their lives.
Recapping your top story, the Economic Freedom Fighters says its national elections campaign is gaining traction among voters just few months after its launch. For SAFM News, I am Luyanda Maume. Headlines at 7:30.
Luyanda, thank you. Those are the top stories for this hour. Don't miss out on a possible car insurance saving. SMS out to 38462 for a quote. Outsurance, where you always get something out. Everyone's looking forward to Black Friday deals, but there may be an easier way to save, and it's not just a once-off saving. Simply SMS out to 38462, and if Outsurance can't beat your current car insurance premium, ask them for 500 Rand cash or even 1,500 Rand if you've been claim-free and with the same insurer for 3 years. That's a monthly saving on your premium or the cash promise. SMS out to 38462. You've got nothing to lose. SMS now. Outsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's apply.
A very good morning to you in your SFM Sports Headlines. It's rugby. The World Cup winning Springboks to face France during the upcoming November tests. And in cricket, the Proteas are a game away from World Cup history. All these stories and more just before 7:30.
SAFM guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning. Some good news. The breakdown on Pretoria's M1 South at Garsfontein has been cleared, so that obstruction's out of the way. It just leaves the queue coming from the N4 down towards the roadworks at the R21. The Mike went into Joburg quite heavy this morning. Gold Reef City all the way through to about Smith Street before you're out of that. Durban, the N2 fully loaded northbound between the M7 and the M13 Bridge roadwork zone. The M7 heading to Pinetown's quite slow between Queensborough, Belleville Road and North Dean. Looks like an issue at that North Dean main road off-ramp, Pinetown bound. And Cape Town has got even heavier this morning coming out of Tableview, as well as the roadworks on Bloberg Road towards Kuberg Road. You've now got no lights on Marine Drive at Sunset Beach and a crash at that Ocean Way junction in the Sunset Beach area. Marine Drive backed heavily from West Coast Road right back into the Sunningdale side. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
Hey, good morning. Tuesday morning, 10 minutes after 7, with SAFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Curtis. Lots going on this morning. We'll talk to the Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation in a moment about gender violence in higher education institutions in a way, and I'll put this to him, I think maybe, as young men enter these institutions, they need to go on some sort of course or something. Maybe, I don't know what else we do. I mean, there are limits to what we can expect government to do to protect women from men. And it's always, it's always the men, isn't it? We'll talk more about that. We were reflecting yesterday after the show. Do you remember the conversation? We touched on it. We didn't really go deeply into it. About transformation in agriculture. In other words, farms. And I remember so clearly conversations around water use licenses. Who gets to take water from a river for their farm? Well, we thought we would focus on that in your mediated conversation this morning. It's really about, I suppose, how do you get transformation in the agriculture sector? People are always a bit nervous about, messing with food, right? And I think we should be. But there seem to me to be two big obstacles to transformation in agriculture. The one is access to land and ownership of land. And the other is access to water, which is a bigger issue, which I hadn't really realized in all the conversations we've seen about land. So we'll talk about that from 8:30 this morning. Plenty to come. Oh, by the way, before I forget, Car Power Ships in around half an hour from now finally agree to do an interview. We'll ask them questions around how their systems will work. 12 after 7.
What was that sound? Was it a life support machine in an ICU ward? Was it a car reversing for the driver to take another look at a woman he saw at the bar last night? Or was it the birth of a new robot machine about to change the world? This time, you decide. It's your story. The award-winning SAFM Playwriting Competition is back. SAFM invites all writers to explore the medium of sound, the theater of the mind, and to create a 1-hour radio play in English. Get writing now and submit your play before the 22nd of January 2024 for a chance to win one of 3 large cash prizes. For more information, visit safm.co.za.
Big stories of the day. #SAFM Sunrise.
13 after 7, good morning. A horrific incident over the weekend in which a man stabbed a woman in a private residence that houses students from the Cape Peninsula University of Technology. The incident caught on video, actually published on social media. I'm not going to describe it to you, it's too distressing. But the man who's 30 is married to the woman who's 26. She's now in hospital. The man's a student at the University of the Western Cape. They've suspended him. The victim is a student at CPUT. But we've seen so many cases like this, and particularly in our higher education institutions. And there's a lot to talk about in that sector at the moment. Dr. Bladen Zamande is the Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation. Minister, good morning, and thank you very much for your time this morning.
Good morning, Stephen, and good morning to your listeners. Thanks for inviting me.
There's so many cases like this, men attacking women, and particularly young women, and it's often at higher education institutions. And I think we can say, look, institutions must do everything they can to protect women. I think they do. But it's also really about our society, isn't it? Like schools reflect our society, so maybe what happens to women in higher education institutions is reflecting what men have done, declaring war on young women, really.
Well, you are right, Stephen. I should actually agree with you. But let me just start by saying I'm really very concerned about what happened. in this case as well as in other cases, And I wish to express that the lady actually who was stabbed and so on, that she's able to recover sooner. And we have been doing all we can to actually tackle this at a number of levels, Stephen, as part of our contribution in dealing with this scourge in our own sector. For instance, we've got our organization that we established some years ago called Higher Health, which is actually helping us to deal with a whole lot of issues, including issues of mental wellness among students and staff. They've got volunteers throughout our universities and colleges that they train. There are also some lay counselors that they actually have. We've also got a hotline. They've got a hotline on reporting GBV or where people feel under threat. I also, by the way, have a policy framework on how institutions should deal with gender-based violence. And I expect each institution, many of them do, to actually have their own policies and their own methodologies. Further than that, especially also in the light of the violence that was taking place at Fort Hare, I have also we've also held what we call a security summit, because there is also that dimension of it to handle this. And that universities, for instance, and TVET colleges, if you take them, they are communities, They've got very large number of students and staff, in one area. For instance, if you look at just the Fort Hare campus in Alice, which has got more than 11,000 students. So one has actually got to deal with all these issues. Indeed, we are part of a larger society that has got this sketch. On our part, we've really gone some way in trying to address this. And as I say, Stephen, just like ordinary communities, we encourage them, for instance, to form community policing forums. Our institutions also, we expect them to actually establish, safety campus, safety forums, and we expect our SRCs, amongst others, to play a lead role, as well as our trade unions and all that. So that is the sketch that we are actually facing. I've also of late launched a huge campaign that we hope to actually sustain into the future on the mobilization of men in the higher education sector to be in the forefront of the fight against gender-based violence, because it's becoming very clear to us that we are not going to be able to win this war unless men are actually able to join this effort and be able to actually deal with this program. I've launched what is largely a UNESCO program, which is where I am now, called Transforming Mentality. In other words, how do we ensure that the kind of masculinity, that we foster in our communities are progressive, Stephen, and they are able to focus on being in the forefront of gender equality and women's emancipation, including the fight against gender-based violence. I am really concerned about this. Much as we are putting a lot of effort, I am sure that the effort we are putting is perhaps preventing some of these things happening. But the statistics still look not good, because our estimate is that 10% of all rape cases in our country happen in our institutions of higher education.
It's a very high number. It tells us so much about our society. It also tells us, I've spoken to so many people about trying to educate boys at schools, educate boys in other places. In a way, I suppose this needs to be, I get bored with this phrase, a whole of society effort. But certainly there's something that your sector can do. As you say, you're trying to do it. The other thing is that it takes a long time to see if you're getting any results. It's a difficult thing to measure.
It is a very difficult thing, Stephen. I do agree with you. But also what we are also doing precisely to try and look at trends, patterns, and areas that are more affected is that this program of mobilization of men, as we are actually launching this campaign, where I'm also pulling to our research institutions, like the Human Sciences Research Council, to actually really help us to also just look at the patterns of the trends, the conditions under which such things arise, because that can be able to give us a better idea and hopefully a better, Stephen, a better handle on this kind of situation. Of course, I must also say, I'm not going to leave this out, that what Higher Health has also helped us is that they are actually interacting with law enforcement agencies as well, so that the reporting line that they actually have is also then enabling all those volunteers to actually link with the police and be able to do this. Of course, the first prize in this thing, Stephen, is to prevent this happening rather than just reporting all the time when people have already been brutalized, like what we have seen, with this footage, for instance, of this case that we are talking about.
Minister, I mean, we're going to obviously keep conversations going around all of this, and there are other things going on in your sector at the moment, and I must ask about NSFAS, the direct payment system to NSFAS students, huge problems earlier in the year. NSFAS trying to cancel some of the contracts with these service providers. The CEO's been suspended. I think he's going to court to challenge that, actually. Do you believe the system is now working properly? I mean, I know that you don't have direct control of NSFAS, but as I understand it, do you think students are getting their money? How worried are you about the situation there? Do you think it's actually now going to improve from where it was?
Stephen, I do wish to say that NSFAS does have challenges, and we don't want to run away from this. It's actually grown from a scheme that was in the early 90s supporting just a few thousand students. We are now over 1 million students that we are supporting. And there are a number of challenges, a number of whom really are factors that we often do not have daily direct contact to them. For instance, one of the difficulties that we've been facing consistently is the need to improve communication between institutions and NSFAS itself. Institutions have to say who are the deserving students each year, which students have actually passed, which students have met or not met the criteria of progression each year, so as to decide whether they are actually funded or not funded. Indeed, it has been very unfortunate, but we've picked up a lot of the problems, that led to the situation, for instance, where they took a decision against the CEO. And I have been in constant contact with the board and actually giving them very firm instruction on making sure that they keep close oversight over the executive management on whether they are actually doing things in line with what is supposed to be done. For instance, I've said now they need to sit down and plan for addressing what the legal report actually investigation said to them. How do we transition from the current service providers to actually new service providers? It's a challenge also, Stephen, because you can't just pull them out anyhow. We are going into the start of the new academic year. In a few months, we have to make sure that we've got all these things in place. And I have said, also in relation to the other problem of off-take agreements with private student providers, because we have huge accommodation shortages, largely because we actually impressively expanded the system so rapidly. But the backlogs in infrastructure have been a challenge. The other challenge has been the capacity of NSFAS itself, that we have not actually been able to get enough money in order for them to build the administrative system to be able to run this. But I am confident that working with this board that we are actually going to overcome these challenges such that we are able to continue to make the system that it works. Last, the system is working. The overwhelming majority of the just over 1 million students are getting their stipends. They are being paid for at university, because it's not just allowances. Allowances, of course, are important, but also we are paying tuition fees. We are also paying accommodation fees that is making the students. Yes, we do have challenges, I must admit. Also, people sometimes say, well, the man, you are being defensive. But we are dealing with a huge backlog, because the announcement of the current scheme, which was adjusted in 2017, the announcement was made on the 16th of December 2017 to expand the system massively in 2 weeks' time, essentially, as well as the universities were going to happen in January. People are saying, yeah, but we have had 5 years. Yes, we've done a lot to actually try and deal with the negative impact of that. But that is the backlog also that we've actually been exposed to. But also what I've been emphasizing to NSFAS is just to continuously informing their stakeholders and also ensuring that stakeholder management for that organization is very important. We must keep close touch with students. We must keep close touch with the registrars of universities. We meet with them every year. I've also just had a meeting with the vice chancellors, and I've committed to them that when we actually open next week the application, also we would have met with them just to say where we are, so that we are able to actually work together. I am confident that these challenges that are there will overcome them, but the system is working generally, Steve.
Minister, thank you very much indeed for your time. Really do appreciate it. Dr. Bladen Zamanda is the Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation. You with SAFM 26 minutes after 7.
Open the Absa Cash Invest Tracker account and earn the best rates in the market. More than the top 10 money market funds' average returns. Enjoy unmatched advantages at an interest rate of 8.9% per annum. Plus, if you open your account today, you could win your share of 15 million rand in luxury travel experiences for 2. Yes, you heard right. A trip for you and your partner. My bank does that. Open yours today in less than 5 minutes on the banking app at your nearest Absa branch, or consult your private banker or call 0860 111 515. Absa is an authorized FSP and a registered credit provider. T's and C's apply.
Meetings Africa celebrates its 15th advent as the premier business events trade show, showcasing Africa's diverse offering of services and products for the meetings, incentives, conferences and exhibition sector. You can access more than 300 great product owners and up to 400 global buyers. Join us at the Sandton Convention Center from the 24th to the 26th of February. Register at meetingsafrica.co.za as we advance Africa together. Meetings Africa, brought to you by South African Tourism.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning. So the All Blacks and France want to play the Springboks again next year.
Yes.
Okay, then.
No rest for the wicked. But yes, France will host the Rugby World Cup champions, the Springboks, as well as the finalists, the All Blacks, during the next 2 November test windows. French newspaper reports said that France and Argentina will meet for the 3rd time in 2024, with Fabien Galtier's charges also facing Japan, New Zealand, the Springboks in November. The reports, however, do not specify which venues will host the matches, although Stade de France will most certainly host the Springboks and the All Blacks. The November test window in 2025 is expected to be the last of its sort before World Rugby's planned worldwide restructure, which would replace the regular July and November internationals. On to cricket news now. Mitchell Starc saying Australia tend to peak at the right time as he remains confident going into the semi-finals against the Proteas in the Cricket World Cup on Thursday, despite suffering back-to-back defeats at the beginning of their campaign to host India and the Proteas. The 5-time world champions finished 3rd to qualify for the knockout stage of the tournament for the 9th time.
It's World Cups, it's what we play for. We're at the pointy end. Seem to be peaking at the right time, which Australia tend to do in tournament play. And whilst we didn't start the way we wanted to, we've certainly had a lot of good contributions from individuals along the way, and we find ourselves in another World Cup semi-final.
Soccer now, just a few days after ensuring that Orlando Pirates got their bragging rights in the Soweto derby, Buck striker Evidence Makgopa is back in the Bafana Bafana fold ahead of the 2026 FIFA World Cup qualifiers against Benin and Rwanda respectively. Makgopa was replaced and injured by the French-based striker Lebo Motiba, and the Bafana coach Hugo Bruce says that Makgopa is the perfect replacement.
Yes, with all the little problems we have now with injuries, I forgot. So Motiba is not there, and he's replaced by Makgopa. I think Evidence, he was already with us, but it's a long time ago. I was very happy that he plays a lot now in Pirates. So I think it's a little bit the same type also than Motiba. So I'm very happy with him to see him back here with us.
And finally, tennis. Alexander Zverev came from a set down to beat the second seed Carlos Alcaraz 6-7, 6-3, 6-4 at the Nitto finals in Turin, while the former US Open champion Daniil Medvedev, he beat fellow Russian Andrei Rublev 6-4, 6-2. More sport on Sunrise. Headlines top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thank you very much indeed. Car power ships, they'll be on the agenda next. We're due to speak to their chief commercial officer. That's coming up. It's you with SFM leading the conversation. It's stage 1 now, stage 3 later, 7:30.
Thank you, Stephen. In your headlines, Statistics South Africa is expected to release the quarterly labor force survey today. South Africa's official unemployment rate for the second quarter was 32.6% from 32.9% in the previous quarter. Secretary to Parliament Xolile George says significant progress has been made in the work to repair the 2 buildings of Parliament worst affected by last year's fire. He says work started in earnest in March after the building was handed over to Parliament by the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. And in a foreign policy speech in London, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has urged Israel to do everything possible to protect civilians, including those in hospital. In his toughest comments yet on the conflict, Sunak has called for an urgent humanitarian pause in the fighting, but stopped short of asking for a ceasefire. I'll have details on these and other stories at 8.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
It's quite busy around Braamfontein and central Joburg this morning. The Mike 1's queuing up from Goldridge City through to around about Smith Street. Behind that, the M2 from Joe Slovo is very heavy. And that Joe Slovo drive is under pressure going north up around the railway subway. Now, when you have sort of extreme weather, which we had last night, you can often get flooding there, so there may well be some lingering impact from last night's big hailstorm and rain. Joe Slovo, very heavy coming off the Heidelberg Road through the M2 and in through towards that Durenfontein area. Crash on Joburg's N3 south at Van Buren, causing a backlog coming through Gelulies in towards the Germiston area. Pretoria's N1, the breakdown at Garsfontein is being cleared, but traffic again this morning, backlogging from Stormville Road. Although it's back there, it's not as heavy as it was yesterday, but still a lot of traffic jamming through towards the roadworks at the R21. They've also got some load shedding on Pretoria East, Garsfontein and Menlyn region, so extra delays there, particularly Garsfontein and Solomon Mashlangu as well. Durban, the N2 running north, heavier than normal from Cement Factory through Spaghetti Junction. The M7, if you're going out through Queensborough towards Pinetown, big queues towards North Dean Junction, and plenty of traffic on the M4 this morning, Jacobs, Clarewood, and then Congela and Bulow, 2 queues to work through Southern Freeway. Cape Town, even worse than normal on the exit from Tableview this morning with lights down and a crash on Marine Drive at the second set of lights at Sunset Beach on your way out. So that's Ocean Way. Big queues back to Sunningdale. The whole Bloberg Road, West Coast Road Junction around the Bayside Centre is heavily jammed as a result of that traffic flow going very slow on Marine Drive. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The business update on SAFM.
Ray Machlaka, good morning. Asian markets, US markets, how are they looking?
Well, both markets are mixed. The investor focus is on the relationship between the US and China. Later today, US President Joe Biden and China's President Xi Jinping will meet in the US. The presidents will look at ways to reduce tensions that have escalated over the last several years, especially during the Trump years. So US markets finished lower yesterday and before the US market officially opens later today. today. And Nasdaq, Dow Jones, and S&P futures are each up 0.1% this morning. In Asian markets, Japan's Nikkei is up 0.6%. China's Shanghai Composite and Hong Kong's Hang Seng are each down 0.1%. And our local market, the JSE, was up 0.3% yesterday. The shares of mining companies were mostly up.
And ShopRite's been looking at the impact of the big taxi strike in Cape Town. What did they find?
Well, South Africa's largest retailer, ShopRite, had to house its workers in hotels to keep them safe during the recent taxi strike and violence in Cape Town. ShopRite had to employ extra security to protect its stores, distribution centers and trucks. The retailer also provided buses with armed guards to transport workers safely to stores. ShopRite unveiled these safety measures yesterday during its annual meeting with shareholders. The steps taken by ShopRite underscore how difficult it is to do business in South Africa. Crime and the rule of law remains a big concern for businesses.
And Sipho Nkosi stepping down as the chair of SASOL. Isn't the timing interesting?
Indeed. There's an annual general meeting scheduled for Friday. Well, that is coming up soon. But Nkosi was appointed to the board of SASOL back in 2019. Nkosi has now stepped down from the SASOL board because some of his business interests might be seen as a possible conflict of interest with SASOL. Nkosi has extensive business experience. He is the former CEO of a coal miner called Exxaro, and he co-founded a coal mining company as well. He is also a non-executive director of Sanlam, and Nkosi was also appointed by President Cyril Ramaphosa to help reduce government bureaucracy, particularly in removing obstacles to economic growth in the country.
Ray Machlaka, thank you very much indeed. Back tomorrow, more news from the business world through the day here on SFM. 24 minutes now to 8.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
David on the line from Durban. David, hi. Gender-based violence. You heard that conversation with the Higher Education Minister.
Good morning and good morning to your listeners. You know, I'm almost 50 years old now, and I'm watching this whole issue of GBV with a lot of interest, But I noticed even by his own acknowledgement, the minister is saying we are losing the battle. It means there's really something they are not doing correctly. We have to start telling our children correctly that, you have one partner. You have one partner. You'll find this thing happening in many instances is because one has found another with a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And these kind of things do happen. So we need to know where the problem is.
Yeah.
You remember the issue of HIV. HIV, we had to tell people to stop this thing of going and sleeping around. And, unfortunately, in these instances, men become instant outcasts, They become isolated because of these kind of events. Yet we need to look at what is the ill in our society. Yeah. How can we correct it? What should we tell our children when they are going to universities and to schools? So we shouldn't be experimenting with our children because this becomes a knee-jerk reaction. Sure. That's why people kill each other. It's not because they meditate on it and say, I want to go and kill my wife or my girlfriend.
Yeah.
But the girlfriend has meditated on having another boyfriend or another husband, while she's got another husband. So it's something that I think we need to start looking at and talk about it correctly and truthfully.
All right, David in Durban, thank you. Look, interesting points. I mean, there's so many different things, and I think we live in a difficult society, for lots of different reasons around this. So I think that's a factor as well. You were there, SAFM. We'll speak to car powerships next.
Gautrain is for the legends who make moves to save and pay from as little as 45 Rand from Pretoria to Midrand. It's for our clever who turn 5-liter bottles into workout dumbbells. And for the slim oaks who bring a home-cooked scuff team to work every day. So when it comes to travel, make moves that save and pay from as little as 45 Rand from Pretoria to Midrand Station. Gautrain, for people on the move. Meetings Africa celebrates its 15th advent as the premier business events trade show, showcasing Africa's diverse offering of services and products for the meetings, incentives, conferences and exhibition sector. You can access more than 300 great product owners and up to 400 global buyers. Join us at the Sandton Convention Center from the 24th to the 26th of February. Register at meetingsafrica.co.za as we advance Africa together. Meetings Africa, brought to you by South African Tourism.
SAFM 104 to 107. Nationwide.
21 minutes to 8. Good morning. Well, the company Car Powership says it expects to soon produce power from a ship in Richards Bay and to be able to sell, I think it's around 450 megawatts of electricity to our grid. You know how controversial this has been, the conversations we've had about it. This deal's been in the works for years. And then there was the situation where Car Powerships bought that piece of land as part of a game reserve. So it's donated land to protect rhino, and I suppose that means it can spoil the environment for birds and fish in Richards Bay. Well, let's finally, after many years of trying, hear from Car Powerships itself, the company, and their global chief commercial officer is Zeynep Harazai Yilmaz. Zeynep, good morning to you and thank you so much for your time.
Good morning, and thank you for the amusing introduction.
When do you think you'll be able to generate this power? When do you think your ship in Richards Bay will be able to start operating?
So we have recently received our environmental application for Richards Bay, which means we're going to sign our power purchase agreement with the IPP office in the upcoming weeks, and then achieve financial close by the end of the year, and hopefully before the end of next year, so within 2024, we'll be able to deliver low-cost, reliable and cleaner electricity in Richards Bay.
As I understand the process within our Environmental Affairs Department, so they've granted permission, but there's still an appeal process. In other words, a non-governmental organisation or another group could actually appeal the decision. Do you think that could happen? Could that delay things further?
That could definitely happen, and we would welcome it because I think South Africa has a very strong green lobby, and it's wonderful for a country to have such a strong green lobby to put corporations in the right direction. Of course, it would happen, and we would answer the necessary questions. We look at the environment in 4 different aspects: marine, air, land, and also noise. In terms of marine, we are just a regular cargo ship. Instead of carrying a cargo, it has inside already an equipped power plant. So the marine impact of the power ship is similar to any cargo vessel that is docked at the port. In the Tema Fishing Harbor, where we operated for many years in Ghana, United Nations Development Program made a documentary on us and the small-scale fishermen, because we've improved the lives of the small-scale fishermen who were our hosts. Fish bred along the power ship. They would park their fishing ships around the power ship, and the electricity we provided enabled their refrigerators to work, so they wouldn't have to throw away the fish that they catch. Instead, they could take home money, feed their kids, send them to school, and have a proper income.
Okay, I'm going to come to
That's what electricity does.
Okay. You lodged applications for 3 sites. There's Richards Bay, there are 2 others. The 2 other sites you don't have environmental permission yet. How are those processes going?
We believe we will receive the environmental applications for the Saldanha project and the Kuha project in the upcoming weeks or months as well. We've done multiple public participation meetings to make sure there were no questions unanswered by the communities for all 3 sites, and the ones that were submitted for Saldanha and Kuha comes after Richards Bay, so it is very natural for them, their environmental application, to come later than Richards Bay as well.
Okay, I mean, there have been some disputes about some of these public meetings, but we'll let all the other people, all of the processes sort that out. There are a few other things. How long, so Richards Bay, how long would you be providing power for? Is it 5 years? Is it 20 years?
So that's a good question. The initial tender duration is 20 years. So we've submitted our price and all our documents for 20 years, but during the IPP office power purchase agreement negotiations, we gave IPP office early exit options at year 5 and year 10. And we are the only company in the world that can actually do that because our asset is floating. So we have the ability to take it to another country. If South Africa does not want us after 5 years, we could potentially take it to Mozambique, Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, or else.
Okay, but so that's true, but why would you go for 20 years in the first place? The world of generating electricity is going to change dramatically in the next 10 years, never mind the next 20. 20 years seems a very strange number. Why not just make it 100 then?
Because the tender was issued for 20 years because the tender requested that you secure, it's a risk mitigation program, you secure the country's base load electricity requirement. Now, let me put things a little in perspective from a power generation view. In South Africa today, there's 40,000 megawatts of coal generation. This coal generation represents 85% of the country's electricity. The electricity we bring will be generated with natural gas, which is the cleanest form of thermal electricity, and it has 50% less emissions compared to coal. So what we are is the first step in the energy transition to renewables. In 20 years from today, South Africa is not going to need more coal. It is definitely going to need more natural gas.
Well, there are disputes around that. As you say, it's the cleanest form of thermoelectricity, but it's not the cleanest form of electricity. Eskom has to give you a grid allocation, and if you don't have a grid allocation, you cannot connect to the grid. And as I understand it, the grid allocation that you were granted ran out in August, and then was extended, I think, to the end of December. And if you're not generating power by the end of December, would that mean you lose your grid allocation? You'd have to go to Eskom again and say, please, can we have our grid allocation for longer? Because we aren't yet producing electricity to add to the grid. Is that right?
Let me go back to the previous comment, if you don't mind, that you cannot have a grid running completely on renewables. The reason for that is the renewables work when sun is shining, wind is blowing, or when it's raining with hydro, but it's not dispatchable baseload power. It's like the same reason why you can't make a pudding with just eggs. You need a balanced portfolio, and renewables, due to their technology, deregulate grids in terms of voltage and frequency, whereas thermal electricity provides regulation for voltage and frequency, which actually enables further renewable integration into the grid. So you need thermal to be able to operate renewables. And the cleanest form of thermal is natural gas. Going to the Eskom capacity issue is that we already have a capacity allocation for the transmission lines for the proper evacuation of the electricity. And that availability is still valid and ongoing.
Okay, but it does run out at the end of December, so you would have to ask for it to be extended again, right?
You need to make a payment to secure for the continuous reservation of those lines.
You're not using your grid allocation now, and isn't that preventing other people from using it?
No, because there are no other projects, and the thing that you need to do to be able to even join a tender, to be able to get a project, is you need that grid allocation. So it's a it's a precondition. So for you to be even awarded a proper tender and to get the project running. So without the grid allocation, we would not actually have the project.
This is my point, is that we have a grid allocation that's not being used. You get it before you get the project, I understand that. But this process has taken such a long time. I realize a lot of that's outside your control. It's our government processes, all of that. I accept that. But we also know that you can build a wind turbine in 18 months, you can build a solar power farm in 2 years. And so the longer that you are not using this allocation because of these problems, the greater the chance, or it could have been possible, that other people could have used that allocation. So my point, where I'm trying to get to, is that are you not preventing other people from using it? I realize that might be out of your control, but the grid allocation is an important issue.
Yes, no, we're not. We're not inhibiting other people from using it. You definitely cannot build a wind farm at that location. You definitely cannot build a solar farm at that location. There are other locations more suitable due to solar illumination and due to wind measurements in South Africa, but the Richards Bay area where we have the grid allocation is not one of them. So you would have a horrible project, and the wind turbines take much more than 3 years to actually build. Even to get the environmental applications for those wind and solar projects you're terrorizing about would take multiple years. The one thing that is important to note is we have already made these power ships ready. Even when we were joining the tender, these power ships for South Africa were ready because we did not build them for South Africa. This is our business plan. We build floating power plants in advance of any contracts and any countries. What we have done is we have joined the tender of South Africa with already existing assets. That's why we've bid the capacities. For example, Richards Bay capacity is 450 megawatt, but Saldanha capacity is 320 megawatt because that's the available ship capacity we have. So we come with ready assets. Today, the voyage of 1,200 megawatts, which is sitting ready in Istanbul, takes 26 days to arrive to South Africa. The only reason we need that time is to do the electrical connection and the gas pipeline, which cannot start prior to the environmental application and the financial close.
Okay. Zainab, as I'm sure you can hear, the issue of electricity and car power ships is usually contested in South Africa, which is one of the reasons I'm putting all of these questions to you. One of the things that we've seen, and we've seen it play out in our courts, is this dispute around the black economic empowerment component for your business in South Africa. It's been brought by the organization Power Group. Could that dispute still affect your company here and how it operates? I mean, that, and this could happen, could lead to more delays as well. You do have to comply with our black economic empowerment law for this all to work.
Yes, our economic development in Richards Bay alone will be more than 6 billion rand for skill building, direct employment, servicing local communities, and creating subsectors of operation and maintenance, ship repair, legal services, and conducting corporate social responsibilities. We take economic development very, very seriously. The Power Group, who are our previous Black Empowerment partners, unfortunately did not comply with their shareholders' agreement. So after multiple notices, we had to part our ways. But we today will submit our new Black Empowerment partner suggestion to the IPP office because they need to approve. So we will definitely comply with the Black Empowerment requirements in South Africa and also in the RMI 4P tender, which we had joined.
You'll be announcing that today?
We will submit it either today or tomorrow.
Okay. You've said several times during this conversation that the ships can arrive within 20 days and they sort of plug in, and when they're done, they leave. You said there's an exit agreement at 5 years and 10 years. But you also say there would be a benefit of 6 billion rand. And I find this difficult to understand because one of the arguments against using car power ships is that there'll be no infrastructure at the end of the contract. Other systems, right? So if we were to build other liquefied natural gas installations on land, in fact, one of your competitors who lost the bid to you made that argument that there will be infrastructure left. With you, there'll be no infrastructure left. So I battle to understand where the 6 billion rand comes from.
The 6 billion rand is fully documented by third-party expert consultants and reported and undersigned. So it's a real commitment from us that keeps us obliged and liable to have that economic development impact. Now, you also need to understand that the power of electricity, power of reliable power is ultimately what is going to drive Richards Bay, not our 6 billion rand, because electricity jumpstarts the economy. When there's no electricity, water pumps do not work. Forget boiling a kettle. You cannot even have water pumped to people's houses. Not many people can afford backup generation in Richards Bay. You can't electrify your house.
Yeah, but that's not
Hospitals
you
don't
can't use the electricity that's being generated as part of your 6 billion. These are specific requirements.
No,
You say this is
obviously
6
it's not.
billion.
Yes, yes.
You say
Oh,
this
it's
is,
not. It's definitely not.
So-
I'm just saying the 6 billion rand is only a drop in the ocean compared to the real benefit we will bring. And what is very amazing in South Africa is that it's such a rich country that is just dying for power. It's the richest country with the commodities it has, with the workforce it has. It will definitely be the heart of the economy in Africa.
Okay. So, I mean, there's certain things that lead to all of these questions around car power ships. For example, the company that did the environmental assessment in the Western Cape had all sorts of problems. There were meetings that were supposed to be held, public hearings with fishing communities where it seemed very few people arrived. You talk about South Africa being a rich country, that can be true. We're also a very cynical country. And so can you understand why people are not actually necessarily accepting of car power ships? I understand what you do. I mean, I get that. I have no problem with that. But what I'm saying is that I think you might find it's actually quite difficult to convince people to trust you.
Well, I think it is very natural and we should be very welcoming of questioning around mega infrastructure projects. I mean, this mega infrastructure project is being done for the public benefit. So the public definitely has every right to question where the tax dollars, tax runs are being spent for. So our job as the company is to make sure no questions leave unanswered. That's what we are trying to do. And with regards to your previous question, in terms of leaving infrastructure behind, my dear, that is what's bad for the environment. The reason why we do not leave any infrastructure behind is because then the power plants has a major decommissioning impact at the end of their life cycle. And you see all these decommissioned land-based power plants all around the world, taking up very valuable landscape and also harming the environment, creating so much environmental footprint. Decommissioning a already finalized power plant in itself is a multi-million-dollar project. So what we do is, with minimal land-based environmental impact, no cutting of trees, no leveling of any site, no mobilizing of any communities, we can bring 450 megawatts right away. And then once there is no need for it, you take it away. That is the most beautiful part of it, that you do not leave environmental footprint behind.
But you do all of this at a very high cost. I mean, it costs a lot of money. And it costs money in intriguing ways. You say it will bring 6 billion rands worth of benefit. I mean, you say it leaves nothing behind, okay? It costs, over 20 years, would cost an astronomical 250 billion rands worth. At a time when the electricity sector is changing so quickly, we probably wouldn't need any thermal power at all. I know you say that we will. I'm not convinced of that, I'm afraid. So let me put it to you plainly so that you can answer. Why should we use your company and your option when there are other cleaner and, from what we can see, quicker and perhaps cheaper overtime methods available? I'm going to give you a minute and a half to make the case for car power ships.
The short answer is because there are none. We are the cheapest, cleanest, and fastest electricity provider in the world. That is the reason why we were awarded a completely financial and technical model-based tender that was technology agnostic. The tender, RMI4P, that we joined, did not do any preferences amongst technologies. It only had to be cleaner electricity and could not be any thermal other than natural gas, because it's the cleanest form. And other than that, there were no technological preferences. You had to bid your lowest price amongst all the participants of the tender, from all the sovereign country companies that have bid. We were awarded because we gave the lowest price. So the electricity we will deliver is less than half the cost of what Eskom is paying for peakers today. Less than half.
Oh, for peakers.
Maybe close to 1/3.
For peakers,
yes,
but not
coal
for base load.
Coal is very economic, but we cannot run the future on coal. Coal, I'm telling you very openly, coal is cheaper than our solution, but you cannot build a future with coal. That's why we are after coal, we are the second cheapest option, and we are 50% less emissions, less pollutant than coal. We are the cleanest form of thermal power. And we are the fastest company in the world that can deliver it. And we run a fleet of 45 ships, power ships all around the world. In Africa, we are in Mozambique, Sudan, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Gambia, Sierra Leone, Guinea-Bissau, and Ghana with 500 megawatts. And in Indonesia, which is a highly developed country, we've had more than 1,000 megawatts. And in Brazil, which is also a quite developed country, we have 600 megawatts running on LNG to power.
Zeynep, we've heard you. Thank you. All right. Zeynep Harazai Yilmaz is the Global Chief Commercial Officer for the company Car Power Ships. Well, your view on that, you know the number. You with SFM leading the conversation just after 8 o'clock. Our insurance will go out of their way to try and save you money on your car insurance. If they can't, ask for 500 Rand. SMS out to 38462. Now that's good news.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Thank you, Stephen. In your top stories, Stats SA to release job numbers, and Parliament Secretary reports on progress on rebuilding the institution. This is SAFM News. A very good morning. I am Luyanda Maume. Statistics South Africa is expected to release the quarterly labour force survey today. South Africa's official unemployment rate for the second quarter was 32.6% from 32.9% in the previous quarter. Some observers say they are not expecting a significant number of jobs created in the third quarter of the year. Tony Ehrenreich is CONSATU Deputy Parliamentary Leader.
We are as concerned as the rest of society about the high unemployment levels. A 40% unemployment level represents a crisis in any society, but the levels of unemployment for young people that's around 60% threatens the very stability of our country, and urgent measures must be implemented by government to address those.
Secretary to Parliament, Xolile George, says significant progress has been made in the work to repair the two buildings of Parliament worst affected by last year's fire. He says the work started in earnest in March after the building was handed over to Parliament by the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. A fire razed two parliamentary chambers and a large number of offices 22 months ago. In a statement, George says approximately 750 cubic meters of rubble was removed from the old and new assembly buildings. Joseph Musia reports.
George says the contractor secured areas badly affected by the fire, and this allowed consultants appointed for the design work access to conduct detailed assessments He says movable assets were recovered from 382 offices and some had to be disposed of. The heritage artifacts and books with historical importance were carefully retrieved and safely stored off-site. A temporary roof was installed on sections of the old assembly building that were affected by the fire. This will ensure that the interior of the building is protected from the elements and that work during construction can continue without disruptions. The next phase of the project includes repairs and upgrades to the two buildings, which is currently in the concept and viability stage. Joseph Musia, SABC News, Parliament.
The EFF says its national elections campaign is gaining traction among voters just few months after its launch. The party held an elections meeting in Kempton Park in the east of Johannesburg yesterday. The one-day gathering reviewed the work that the party's volunteers have been doing since the launch of their campaign in July. EFF Deputy President is Floyd Shibambu.
The reality is that we are far much more stronger now than we ever have been as the EFF. Like the ground is far much more ready for the elections of 2024. We've got representation in literally all the 4,364 wards of South Africa. We've got presence in all the 23,000 VDs, all the sub-regions, including in areas where we do not have councillors of the EFF. We've got solid presence. So we are at our strongest ever. Since the formation of the EFF, we are far much more ready to be giving proper election outcome in 2024.
The investigating officer in the Senzo Meyiwa murder case, Vusumuzi Mokhane, is expected back on the stand at the High Court in Pretoria today to testify about the vehicle tracking data on day one of the accused Bongani Ntanzi arrest. Mokhane has told the court that they took Ntanzi from the Moroka police station in Soweto to the Vosloorus Magistrates Court on the 19th of June 2020, where he made an alleged confession statement. He, however, testified that the matter was not on the court roll. Ntanzi is one of the 5 men on trial for Meyiwa's murder. The soccer star was shot dead in October 2014 in Vosloorus in the east of Johannesburg. The defense is challenging the admissibility of confession and pointing out statements allegedly made by accused 1 and 2. Ntanzi alleges he was assaulted and tortured at various locations to get him to sign the confession statement. Ntanzi claims stops were made in Germiston, Albertine and Orlando. Mokhane says the only stop that was made was in Albertine and for refreshments.
This evidence is relevant. Like I say, it's interlinked to the evidence which was given by Mokhano, and it is also interlinked to the assertion which were put to this witness that that vehicle traversed certain locations and that vehicle facilitated the assault on accused number 4. So that the cogency of that evidence, I believe, can assist this court in establishing. I've quoted all the authorities. I don't have to read them. Is it in the interest of justice to allow that evidence? Is it relevant in this case? On both accounts, I find that it is, and consequently the state is allowed to lead that evidence.
The roof of the Southern Sun Rosebank Hotel in Johannesburg collapsed last night after a freak hailstorm. A preliminary report says no injuries were reported. Johannesburg Emergency Services spokesperson Robert Molaudzi says most areas around the city were affected.
Last night, in most parts of the city of Johannesburg, we experienced a hailstorm which affected mostly the areas like Braamfontein, Polshof, Midrand, Marlborough, Soweto, and of course Rosebank also, and the damages were mostly vehicles. Also, one of the hotels in Rosebank, I think Southern Sun Hotel, of which the roof collapsed, and then there were no casualties or people who were injured on that incident.
And finally, in a foreign policy speech in London, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has urged Israel to do everything possible to protect civilians, including those in hospitals. In his toughest comments yet on the conflict, Sunak called for an urgent humanitarian pause in the fighting, but stopped short of asking for a ceasefire.
They must take all measures to protect innocent civilians, including at hospitals, stop extremist violence in the West Bank, and allow more aid into Gaza. Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, described to me the terrible suffering of the Palestinian people. Too many civilians are losing their lives.
Recapping your top stories, Statistics South Africa is expected to release the quarterly labour force survey today. South Africa's official unemployment rate for the second quarter was 32.6% from 32.9% in the previous quarter. For SAFM News, I am Luyanda Maume. Headlines at 8:30.
Leander, thank you. Those were the top stories for this hour. Don't miss out on a possible car insurance saving. SMS out to 38462 for a quote. Outsurance, where you always get something out. Don't wait for Black Friday to get access to great deals. SMS out to 38462 and ask Outsurance to give you a better deal in your car insurance. Ask them for 500 Rand cash if they can't beat what you're currently paying, or a massive 1,500 Rand if you've been claim free and with the same insurer for 3 years. That's out to 38462. That's a monthly saving on your premium or the cash promise. You've got nothing to lose. SMS now. Outsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's apply.
A very good morning to you. In your SFM Sports Headlines, soccer, Bafana Bafana head coach Hugo Bruges has called up Orlando Pirates striker for his squad ahead of the upcoming 2026 FIFA World Cup qualifiers. And the 21st race of the Formula One heads to Las Vegas, and that's on the 19th of November. We'll bring you all these stories and more just before 8:30.
SAFM. Guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Joburg N3 going south through from Edenvale in towards Germiston stays heavy. It's a breakdown after Galulies and a crash scene around the Heldenay, so quite heavy. Getting through Galulies to Germiston and backlogs on the N12 and R24 routes coming in from the east. Joe Slovo, very heavy this morning from the M2 up through the railway subway. Could well be an impact from last night's hail and maybe a bit of flooding around that subway. Load shedding in Sandton now until 10 a.m. this morning. Winnie Mandela onto Sandton Drive coming to Parkmore is already heavily backed up. Durban, big queues on the M7 out to Pinetown. That's a fallen tree at North Dean. They've also got a major delay coming in on the N3 today from Paradise Valley through Pavilion in towards a heavily congested N2 North at Spaghetti Junction. Cape Town crash, N1 inbound before Kubo get a change. Traffic parking back to Belleville. No lights on Marine Drive at Sunset Beach. That's heavy out of Sunningdale and Blowberg and Tableview. And the crash on the N2 inbound at Khayelitsha just after the Spine Road exit, pushing traffic back to Baden-Powell Drive. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
10 after 8, good morning. You're with SAFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. All right, so you heard there on the record, Car Powership, their Global Chief Commercial Officer, Zeynep Harazi Yilmaz. Your views on that? Has she changed your mind one way or another? Obviously, some of this is very technical. I'm not a technical electricity person, as you know, but I sort of try and argue with everybody. So I don't know what you think. Do you think we should now sign the deal? Do you think we shouldn't? Should we go for the full 20 years? Should we run away screaming? I don't know how you feel about it after listening to their side of the story. And we've tried many times, by the way, to get their side of the story. So I'm pleased that we finally did. 086 000 2032. And let me add a little caveat to your question, just for fun, which is that the person who will have to probably make the final decision in the end is Barbara Creasy, the Environmental Affairs Minister. She's told us, whenever I've asked her about it, she said appeals come before her. What would you do if you were Barbara Creasy when this happens, 11 after 8?
SAFM invites you to our inaugural public lecture, delivered by the former Chief Justice, Mogoeng. The theme of the lecture is constitutionalism and upholding the rule of law in South Africa. Has corruption and malfeasance eroded the moral fabric of the democratic dispensation? The lecture will take place on the 29th of November 2023 at the SABC M1 Studios in Johannesburg. Secure your seat by emailing us at info@safm.co.za.
SAFM, leading the conversation.
The beauty, power, elegance and speed of horse racing.
The passion at the heart of horse racing diligence.
Where these magnificent creatures and their skilled jockeys compete for glory.
Racing today.
Catch it live on Mondays to Fridays on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com.
#Horses of Great Character. Brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
Stay on top of all meaningful, top trending stories right here on SAFM. Leading the conversation.
Well, you heard the conversation with car partnership. Some reaction coming into that this morning. Voice notes on 0614 104 107.
Stephen, the car power lady is correct. It is a quick fix. We'll plug in the power station, off it'll go. But after 20 years, our power station will sail out of Richards Bay, and there goes all our power. Will we have the power to replace it by that time? Mike East London.
All right, Mike in East London, thank you. Well, look, I don't know. I mean, this is why I find the issue so interesting, sort of plug and play, but you're just paying, you don't build anything yourself. And that's what worries me a little bit, as you heard. But they've spoken for themselves, and they must continue to do that. Is it Trevor on the line from Cape Town? Trevor, you want to talk about corruption? Hi.
Hi, good morning, Stephen. How are you, sir?
I'm well, go for it.
Stephen, I don't know where to begin. By the president that preaches anti-corruption, and then the same day, people get shot. People that is relating, to corruption, police people, or the minister of police, Ekechele, the one who turns a blind eye, where his members are making corruption a daily activity. I am riddled with police corruption. I have been violated so many times by policemen. I've been to IPID, I've been to a Human Rights Commission, I've been to provincial police, I've been everywhere to lay my complaints. But it seems that corruption, especially police corruption, are covered for.
Yeah.
Because if their own boss, imagine, Stephen, bumping by mistake into their boss, the Minister of Police, Betty Chele, by mistake, twice.
Yeah.
And twice this man has told me that he's going to schedule meetings and get back to me.
And nothing happens.
After that, nothing, not even from his office. After that, I've been to his office at Parliament Chambers about 4 times to follow up as to when he is going to, own up to what he was telling me. You know, I mean, there are many, many victims. But
Trevor,
Stephen,
Trevor, we took a very similar call from Ibrahim yesterday, also in Cape Town. I've made a note of your number, Trevor. I hope that's okay. And let's put some of these together. I think maybe the best thing. And Trevor, I can't promise. I can't. We can try and convince the police to act, but I can't promise that. So, Trevor, we'll keep your number and we'll see and we'll go from there. I know that you'll be disappointed with that response, but let's see what we can do. I think we need to put...
because we'd like to buy it. 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 You want to sell it? We want to buy it. We buy cars. The best way to sell your car by far.
Have you ever noticed how unique the rugby ball is?
You should check out Head High.
The rise of junior rugby stars Mana and Tai.
Vince is not just their stepfather, he's their coach.
Catch the brothers' dream of the black jersey, Head High, every Sunday at 9 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com.
# Rugby Drama Galore. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Conversations that you connect with and react to. SAFM.
Well, there's been news over the weekend of 2 Mozambican nationals who are trying to steal 1.9 million rands worth of infrastructure lights belonging to eThekwini. They were arrested while trying to go through the border. The Deputy Assistant Commissioner and Acting Component Head for Operations and Law Enforcement at the Border Management Authority, the BMA, of course, relatively new. The Deputy Assistant Commissioner is Stephen Funnell. Stephen Funnell. Deputy Assistant Commissioner, good morning, and thanks for your time.
Good morning, Stephen, and good morning to SAFM listeners.
How did you catch these 2 people? They must have been trying to carry a huge amount of infrastructure.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Stephen. We, as the Border Management Authority, obviously has 2 key functions at our borderline environment. First, it's obviously to look at what's happening along the borderline, but another important function is to see how do we control access and entry into the country at our ports of entry. This was one of those incidents where our border officials at Kosi Bay on Saturday had stopped a vehicle And upon investigating closer to, and then found a number of boxes in the vehicle. So that's pretty much what happened.
How do you know they're from eThekwini? I suppose maybe that eThekwini stamps on them or something. Property of.
Well, the first thing that officials did was to get the Hawks involved in this. So they were very much central to our operation. And I must say that was not really an intelligence-driven operation, rather than just an operation that was conducted by officials who were quite aware of, the movement of goods out of the country. And when we investigated closer, we realized that these things are actually coming from eThekwini with the Hawks, because we also involved the eThekwini municipality or metro in this.
Okay. What this also points to is that people were trying to get this bakkie through. But in that area, I mean, I know people who tell me they go on holiday to Corsi Bay. You can actually walk around the border if you really want to. You might not want to carry a huge amount of stuff. But policing that area, is that quite difficult between us and Mozambique?
I always maintain the view that, with the border security, South Africa is almost by its own. There's nobody who is actually assisting, and the collective or regional security is actually not existing in that space. That's the one part of it. But you are absolutely right. It's an area that we have particular problems along that northern borderline with KwaZulu-Natal in the southern part of Mozambique. The 78 kilometers between ourselves and Mozambique, presents a number of challenges. Vehicles that are taken through that port of entry, or actually not through the port, but on the peripheral areas of the port of entry, through the borderline. And with the Border Management Authority and the border guards that we are putting up there now, actually deployed there for the last year, we had a number of successes in the area because of the movement of goods. And the fact that the port is now a commercialized port actually brings another dimension to it, because previously ports travelers would not have had to, would not allowed to be taken some of the goods through. But now that it's a commercial port, it allows for anybody to take any type of, goods through the port of entry. But it is for our border authorities just to make sure that we are more vigilant in areas like Corsi Bay.
I mean, there's so many other issues, like literally every day, almost, Deputy Commissioner, we will take calls from people who say, our problem is porous borders. And we all understand. I mean, you made the point that, we're really on our own, and sort of Mozambique isn't doing it, I suppose, is what we can draw from that. But it's a very difficult job to do. Do you believe the Border Management Authority is going to get better? Or do you think the problem is actually going to be unstoppable? It's going to be unfixable?
I think the launch of the Border Management Authority on the 5th by the President has actually highlighted the problem that we have in this country in terms of border security. Now, I must say to you, Stephen, the Border Management Authority is here. It's an authority that obviously will take care of, as we say, the borderline as well as in the port of entry. But I think more importantly, it's a complex area. It's an area that is quite difficult, where you have actually, more than one, stakeholder in the space. And sometimes you'll find it difficulty that you don't step on each other's toes. But with the protocols that are put in place, we are quite clear as a BMA. What is our functions? What is our role? And we have no confusion there. So we will just do what we are tasked to, and not to embarrass the President of what he had launched on the 5th of October.
Thank you very much indeed. Deputy Assistant Commissioner Stephen van Niel is the Acting Component Head for Operations and Law Enforcement at the Border Management Authority. 22 minutes now after 8.
At SFM Radio and at Stephen Grootes on Twitter.
Well, from time to time, when we're back to electricity, you'll have heard the phrase battery storage. And I'm not talking about something that gives you, 1.5 volts. I'm talking about something that's a little bigger than that would really be able to store a huge amount of electricity. And there are all sorts of things you can do with that. It means you can generate electricity during the day when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing, and use that electricity later. And once you're able to time shift electricity, well, all sorts of things are possible. Velapi Ntuli is the General Manager for Operations Enablement at Eskom, and there's a new big installation that's now happened at the Hex site in Worcester in the Western Cape. Velapi, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen, to you and your listeners.
So how big is your battery? I bet it's bigger than mine.
No, thanks, Stephen. So, Stephen, yes, we have launched the battery storage at Hex, close to Worcester, which is about 20 megawatts. But this is a part of a bigger battery energy storage program that we have undertaken as Eskom. So under phase 1, all in all, we are looking at launching 199 megawatts across 8 various sites. So the Hex site was the first one to be finished, and that is a 20 megawatt site. which is about, big enough to power a town like Mossel Bay for about 5 hours. So we are pretty much happy with that, and that we finished it on time, and largely within budget.
Battery technology is moving very quickly. What kind of batteries are you using?
So there we're still using lithium-ion batteries. We were working together with a Korean contractor, but those batteries were sourced basically from China, from a company in China, but they are lithium-ion batteries.
And how long will they last? Because these batteries don't last forever, unfortunately. Do you expect this to last for, what, 20 years, more than that?
Yes, approximately we expect that. So with the battery storage system, one of the key things to keep it together is the management system. So we are having various centers. There's one center that we are almost complete in installation, which would be in Megawatt Park. But you would have a monitoring system that basically determines, how much you discharge your battery. And with that management system, we are confident that this would last us 15 to 20 years with management. Yes, during the period we will change some cells which will go bad, but the whole installation is close to 20 years.
It's like your cell phone. You shouldn't charge it all the way to full, and you shouldn't run it down all the way either. Keep it between sort of 20 and 80, I suppose, percent.
That is correct.
Yes. You're obviously going to have more of these, and once you have them installed, what does it allow you to do? It allows you to use more renewable power. It allows you to time shift electricity from when it's generated to actually when it's used. And that gives you a lot more flexibility as Eskom, I would presume.
That is correct. So one of the key things is there are periods, as much as we do have load shedding, but there are periods that we have excess capacity or generation on the grid. So instead of that energy not being used, then it gives us an opportunity then to store this energy onto the batteries. So when we are, energy constrained and we are struggling with, having more generators on the system, then we can then deploy these batteries to help us with additional capacity when it's mostly required. So that is one of the key things that we expecting to achieve with it. And you would have seen that also with the regulated program, there's been a bid that was out for battery storage. So used with renewable energies, more especially on the wind side, because sometimes wind blows 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning, then you are able to then store that energy into the batteries. And then, during peak times in South African time, which is either early morning or late in the afternoon, then you can dispatch these batteries to support with peak.
It's very interesting to see how things are changing. Thank you very much indeed. Really do appreciate the time. Valapian Tuli is the General Manager for Operations Enablement at Eskom.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning. Evidence Makgopa.
Yes, he's back. He's been called up by the Bafana coach Hugo Bruges. The striker from Orlando Pirates is a replacement for the injured Lebo Motiba. The Bafana coach is also waiting on medical reports from Tepelo Maseko and Grant Kekana. But this is now for the FIFA World Cup qualifiers. Bafana will go up against Benin and Rwanda respectively. Now, Coach Bruges says he's been waiting for Makgopa and believes him coming to the camp is at the right time.
Yeah, okay. That's a loss. Yeah, okay. You can't say no, it's nothing. But what I said already in the press conference, this will not be an excuse for me if the results are not good against Benin and Rwanda to say, yeah, but Foster was not there, yeah, but Motiba was not there. I'm confident in the players who are there, and I know if they achieve the normal level that we can win against both teams.
On to the FIFA president Gianni Infantino. He's hailed the positive impact of the African Football League as Mamelodi Sundowns were crowned as the inaugural champions. Infantino said the creation of the African Football League has made a positive contribution to world football.
Well, I think the time has come for African club football to move to the next level, to retain some of the best players, that they don't have to go and sign contracts abroad. They can stay here. And they can play in a top-level competition, which is not only pan-African, but which is also shown and has an impact all over the world. So this is here to stay, this is here to grow, This is here to have an impact. This is here to give hopes and dreams to the entire African population in Africa and to the world population around the world.
On to cricket now as we build up to the Proteas taking on Australia on Thursday. Mitchell Starc confirming that he'll retire from ODIs before calling time on his Test career as his side, the Australians, prepare for this much anticipated ICC World Cup 2023 semi-final against the Proteas. It'll take place in Kolkata on the 16th of November. Starc has 230 ODI wickets in 119 matches, but he's certain he won't be around for the next World Cup, which will be co-hosted by South Africa, Zimbabwe and Namibia.
No, I look to keep playing after this. I don't doubt that I won't be making the next World Cup. I have no vision for that. 4 years is a long time. I've always maintained that Test cricket's definitely the top of the tree for me, and I'll drop off the rest before I let go of Test cricket or where my body's at. So, yeah, for me, it's just another semi-final or another one-day game for Australia.
And you can catch that final live on SABC3, SABC Sport from 10 a.m. We'll have the build-up. And finally, tennis, Britain's Emma Raducanu pulling off out of an exhibition match in Macau as she continues her rehabilitation from hand and foot operations. The 2021 US Open champion, who turned 21 yesterday, has not played since April and is still hoping to return to the tour in January. We'll have more sport for you on SFM around 12:30. I'm Zai,
thank you very much indeed. Well, lots to come. We'll talk about the transformation in agriculture. It's about land and it's about water. You with SFM leading the conversation, 8:30.
Thank you, Stephen. In your headlines, Statistics South Africa is expected to release the quarterly labour force survey today. South Africa's official unemployment rate for the second quarter was 32.6% from 32.9% in the previous quarter. Police say they've arrested a second suspect in connection with the murder of the activist Loyiso Nkotla, who was gunned down in Philippi in April this year. Hawk spokesperson Siyabulela Vugubi says the serious organised crime investigation team based in Bellville traced and arrested a 38-year-old man in Pretoria yesterday. And President Cyril Ramaphosa is expected to travel to Qatar today. The president will be on a 2-day state visit in the Gulf region. I'll have details on these and other stories at 9.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
N1 in Pretoria, not as bad as it was yesterday. There's still some queues from Garsfontein down to the R21 work zone, but there is a backlog from Linwood to Atterbury. Looks like something may have happened just ahead of the roadwork queue as you come into that Atterbury exit. There is a crash on the M1 North at Allendale, so delays getting up through the Buccleuch interchange as you begin a slow trip through Midrand. Breakdown and a collision scene on Joburg's N3 South at Bedfordview. Heavy coming through Galilees from Edenvale, and 12R24 is badly backed up. Also, Joe Slovo Drive remains heavy on the run north to Doornfontein. Wouldn't be surprised if that is something to do with last night's rainstorm. There's also a big queue on the Mike 1 and M2 routes this morning getting into the Crown. There is a collision in the Crown interchange. Mike 1 North, M2 West under pressure. Driving into Durban, the crash at Paradise Valley, so the N3 through Pinetown being held up. And Cape Town this morning, 2 collision scenes on the N1, one before Kubo interchange, another just past the Marine Drive at Lower Church. Very heavy still on the run in the M1 from Belleville. There's a crash at Khayelitsha on the N2 past Spine Road causing a delay. And Tableview extra heavy this morning. Lights out on Marine Drive at Sunset Beach. Roadworks on the Bloberg Road at Refinery side. It is super heavy congested, including all the routes to take you out into that heavily congested Bloberg and Marine Drive options. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
Good morning, 27 minutes now to 9. The time for your mediated conversation this Tuesday morning. Yesterday you heard a claim here on SAFM Sunrise that new regulations around who can export certain agricultural products to the European Union and to the UK will include requirements around black economic empowerment. The claim was made that the Agricultural Department was only going to allow black farmers or black-owned farms to export certain wine and dairy goods to these markets. But government says, actually, this is not true, and in fact no new regulations around race are being imposed. However, All of this does demonstrate and does remind us of the problems that we're having when it comes to transforming our agricultural industry or our commercial farms. And from what I understand, the vast majority of commercial farms are in fact owned by white people, white families, or majority white-owned corporations. Key to this is access to land and access to water, which is why this may make transformation in the space so complicated. So then what is happening, and is it possible to transform the commercial agricultural industry in our country? First this morning, the view from government. Is it pushing transformation? What problems are there? Dr. Sifiso Ntombela, Special Advisor to the Minister of Agriculture, Toko Dudiza. Then, what it's actually like being in the farming spaces. These phrases can be difficult, but sometimes people use the phrase an emerging farmer. Let me rather use his title. Malapane Tamaga is an economist at the African Farmers Association of South Africa. And then, where are we with transformation? What needs to happen? Wandile Seklobo is the lead economist at the Agricultural Business Chamber, Agbiz. We start then with Dr. Sifiso Ntombela, Special Advisor to the Agriculture Minister. Dr. Ntombela, good morning and thanks for your time.
Good morning, Stephen, and good morning to your listeners. Thank you for having me.
Sure. Just to get on the record first, and to give you an opportunity to respond to the reports over the weekend, the reports were that government was introducing black economic empowerment requirements for farmers to sell certain goods in the EU and the UK. That led to all sorts of headlines. White farmers can't sell these goods, etc. Is race a criterion?
Stephen, thank you for that question and the opportunity to clarify that. I think it is important to know that those weekend reports were inaccurate in terms of saying that government is introducing new race-based policies to export or to inhibit certain racial groups of farmers into export. There's no such thing as that. All exporters on kind of size and race are required to go to and export into the European market, including the United Kingdom. And the regulations simply provide on annual basis, provide a procedure on how government will allocate and evaluate the quotas that are basically given into farmers when they export and benefit into the advantages that are provided by that market. And part and parcel of that procedure is to look at the issues of safety through the sanitary and phytosanitary measures, is to look at the capability of the applicant to export and use those quotas, and including, of course, the compliance into the Agri-BE, which is a South African law. And it has been like that since 2016 for the European market. It has been like that since 2021, when after Brexit and the UK becoming independent from the EU.
Okay, so thank you for that. All right, we've got that on the record. Let's just talk now generally about the issue of transformation in commercial farming. And if we sort of look at the historical context to this, you had a big commercial farming sector dominated by white people who had access to, I think, two key things. The one was land, and this goes back many years. I'm often reminded in these discussions, Dr. Ntombela, as I'm sure you know, that more than half of agricultural farms have been bought or sold since 1994. So that scrambles the picture a little bit. And then the other is access to water, which is also difficult. So then, if that's the context, what is government trying to do to promote or create or enable transformation in this sector?
Maybe, Stephen, to give the listeners a sense, one of the key first steps that government did, the democratic government, when it took over in 1994 and especially in 1995 after government of unity, was to really drive land reform. And land reform has two purposes: is to redress the historic disadvantages and create inequality into the access into land going forward, not only just for agriculture, but for all the non-agricultural purposes. Hence, the land reform program have three pillars: the restitution, the restitution and tenure security, particularly those that have weak tenure securities. Indeed, Stephen, there has been some progress around that land reform. As we know, over 5.2 million hectares have been bought by government through the land redistribution pillar. There's some also improvement on the restitution and arrays. Yes, the progress is not to the satisfaction of the majority of South Africans for a variety of reasons, which I wouldn't want us to maybe go into the detail of that what they provided there. The second area which has been difficult, as you will know, that land alone does not drive transformation and productivity, is access into financing, which has been one of the difficult programs on areas into the South African agricultural sector over the years. We have seen some of the programs that government drive themselves through the what we call Comprehensive Agricultural Support Program. We have seen government also partnering with the private sector, including the development financing through what it called blended finance system, which provides affordable financing to return the land into productivity. That's a second area which government has went in very strongly on that. The third one, Stephen, which I want to talk about, which you address as well, is then to ensure that once you produce these, where do you take it? Where do you sell it? And it is access into markets, both domestically and internationally. And I can tell you, Stephen, that government, working with the private sector, particularly the commodity association groups like Grain SA, South African Wine Industry, Citrus Growers Association, and so forth. As we speak today, 55% of the value of the agricultural sector is generated from the export market, which basically shows the success of government negotiated trade agreements with the EU, as we know, with the AGOA and all other agreements that have ensured that South African products are seen in the different countries, but also locally, the revival of what we call fresh produce market to drive in the issues of access to market.
Okay. I'm sorry, Dr. Ntobela, there's a lot to it and it's a big topic. How important is water to all of this? So let me just explain the context as I understand it, and this comes from conversations we've had with the Water Affairs Department when they tried to slightly change the way in which unused water was going to be allocated. So as I understand it, you obviously need water to farm. To do it commercially, you need a lot of water. You preferably want to be on a river. This land tends to be owned by, again, white-owned farms, whether they're owned by families or by companies. And this water is already allocated. Now, if you want to disrupt that allocation, that's difficult. You'd have to move the farm or stop farming or whatever. Is water a big problem? Is water a big element of this?
Water is a big a challenge, and water, just like land, it's one of the very scarce commodity in the South African context. As we know, we're a water scarce country. Now, let's give some of the stats as well on the water side. We know that about 66% or around about there, it's of total water available assets in the country is used by the agricultural sector, which is in competition with other sectors. Within the agricultural sector, 95%, according to the latest statistics from Water and Sanitation, water rights allocated to what we'll call the white farmers in the country, regardless whether they are small or large-scale farmers. And of course, these things are the function of legislations that were put in place in the apartheid and the prior regime. And one of the key things, Stephen, which is very important as you drive the inclusivity, which this government has always said, it must be done in the manner that is not disruptive into the economy and provide order into it. And for you to understand that and to be able to achieve that, you must put regulation in place that provide a framework of how do we then achieve that. And I think what the Water and Sanitation is doing, it says, in some of the water, which I think it's about 1%, it says of that
tiny
1%,
percentage,
this, let's start implementing the pillars of inclusivity and transformation so that we start diversifying on it. So it's not even talking about the allocated water on its own. It's an unallocated water, and it provides a framework to say, which is still in the discussion of how do we then drive that going forward. So I think these things, in our view, should be really engaged in a view of driving an inclusive and ensuring that we have an orderly economy that is participation to all racial groups and to the country, reflective of the population dynamics of the country.
Dr. Sifiso Ntobela, thank you very much indeed. There's a lot more to talk about, and we'll continue the conversation. He's Special Advisor to the Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development in South Africa. As you know, complicated issue. You're with SFM, 18 minutes to 9, continuing your mediated conversation around transformation in commercial agriculture. Malapane Tamaga is an agricultural economist at the African Farmers Association of South Africa. Malapane, good morning and thank you for your time.
Good morning, Mr. Grootes, and good morning to the listeners of SFM.
Please, may I invite you to call me Stephen. How difficult is it for, and I'm not sure what the right phrase to use is here, you may prefer the phrase emerging farmers, let me say black commercial farmers. How difficult is it for them to get into this market, to get the land and to get the water to actually farm commercially?
I think, Mr. Grootes, I'll continue to call you this. What is important in the agricultural sector, you agree with me, is that when you're sitting on the site, the first thing that you may want to, argue is access to land, which has been really something that, black farmers have been struggling to get in the sector. But for those who were lucky to be beneficiaries of land reform, once they are allocated land, they get to realize that actually there's more into agriculture than just access to land. You realize that you will need your water licenses, you will need, your market access. And in as far as market access, there are issues related to compliance, which cost so much fortune for one to have access to. And when it comes to the matters related to finance, access to finance from the commercial bank or developing institutions, also that becomes a quite a big challenge. So as a result, and unfortunately, all these things, they have to be achieved all at the same time. And unfortunately, agriculture, tend to work in economies of scale. If you produce less, you're unlikely to can even make a dent, and therefore one has to produce in bigger and bigger volumes. And unfortunately, the strategy that the government has been using really has not yielded the results that we wanted, especially when it comes to your recap, and CASP policies of the government. Vis-a-vis what the industry bodies have been doing. These are your industry, your commodity groups, which tend to focus mainly on the impact, rather than the bigger number of people that they want to sort of make an impact in. So if anything, if you were to bring the two together and sit on the same table, because on the other hand, you have government supporting farmers independently of the industry bodies. And on the other hand, you have the industry bodies also doing their own thing. And the good thing now, maybe which is positive from the master plan, is that they're trying to bring about what is called the round table. And through these round tables, the idea is to per commodity, bring all the parties together so that whatever that is done towards transforming the sector is done collectively, rather than done by, a fragmented approach.
Do you think that this is actually going to happen? Are we going to see bigger change? I mean, it seems to me that, Lenin would use the phrase the means of production, but land and water are so key to this that it's very difficult to try and get around those two things.
It's very difficult, Stephen. Firstly, it can be quite an emotive issue. It can be quite a political issue. I think if there's one battle we have won so far, is the battle of accepting that, transformation is here, inclusivity is here, and therefore everyone, eventually will have to comply, will have to see to it that, they play a role in as far as inclusivity is concerned. There are about 4 or 5 pillars that speaks to, BEE in the sector, which speaks to ownership, management control, skills development, enterprise development, as well as socioeconomic development. So as a player in the sector along the value chain, one way or the other, you have to find a way of contributing along those lines. And unfortunately, what has been really a big difficulty, and I think going forward, it's something that as a FASA, we're going to really emphasize that, government get to implement, is the enforcement of the very BEE. As far as it is now, it's sort of something that willingly, someone will have to do when they want, if they don't want to, and therefore they just continue with their lives as usual. I think there will have to be, enforcement policies that will see to it that every player along the value chain, one way or the other, they will have to sort of play their part.
Strangely, the easiest way to do this may be access to markets. You might be able to legislate there more easily than anywhere else. In other words, to say to people, you have to actually buy things from black farmers. And that may, over time, change the game and get around some of the other problems if capitalism works properly.
I think that could assist a lot. Unfortunately, there's a lot of fronting that is happening. I mean, you can say you buy from black farmers. I might as well, as a black farmer, be buying from a white farmer and reselling. So fronting is quite a challenge in the sector. So as a result, one will have to look at other measures, including when it comes to permits that are allocated annually. Your water permits, your export permits, that anyone who will have to access those permits, one way or the other, they will have to sort of comply. And in that way, it forces even those who are not keen, who are not progressive, to find ways through which they can also play their part.
So, do you think that there actually, I mean, it's been a long time since we became a democracy, and I realize that was about political power, not economic. Is there anything that's changed that makes you think in 30 years things will be very different in this sector?
You know, if anything, it's the item that I've spoken about earlier, that it's more and more acceptance in the sector that, you know, transformation is here, that inclusivity, it's something that it's real and it has to be implemented. And if you look at different industry bodies, you can see that there are efforts in place that, you know, are put to see to it that there's a role that is played by all these industry bodies. Maybe if that's one thing that we need to get correctly Mr. Grootes, is with regards to measuring transformation. I feel like we don't know if we're going or coming. If you were to ask in terms of export of agriculture products, how many are from black players? In terms of finance allocated to the agricultural sector, how much in terms of value it's going to black players? You'll be shocked if really such, you know, statistics were to be done. You realize that even the development finance institutions, your land bank, your IDCs are not really doing what they should be in terms of their mandate of developing farmers. So I think one other measure will be, you know, trying to measure transformation annually so that we are able to see the trend. You can give an example with the land. I think initially there was a target to achieve about 30% transfer of land to black people by 2014. Where are we now? We are in 2023. And really, we are still far from reaching the 15% of 2014. So you can go on and on when it comes to finance, when it comes to export of agricultural products, to market of agricultural product in the fresh produce sector. You know, it's a real challenge. And hence you see now the investigation with regard to our fresh produce market.
Mr. Malapane Tamaga, sir, thank you very much indeed. The agricultural economist at the African Farmers Association of South Africa. In a moment, Wandile Seklobo, the lead economist at AgBiz, the Agricultural Business Chamber. Transformation in commercial agriculture is our conversation. It's 10 minutes to 9.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Yes, very good morning. Still busy into Joburg's Crown Interchange. A collision on the Mike 1 inside the Crown, so delays coming up from Gold Reef City. N3 South still under pressure from Edenvale to Germiston. It's a breakdown at Van Buren. And then just after that, there's a crash scene. And behind that, you've got a big queue coming in on the N12 and R24 route. Santon undergoing some load shedding until just after 10 o'clock. So lots of delays there. South Road, Greyston, Catherine, Santon Drive, Winnie Mandela, as well as Bryanston and Ballyclare. They are all loaded up around multiple lights that are down. There is a crash on the M1 south from Pretoria this morning near Atterbury Road. That's keeping traffic pushed back towards Linwood Road territory. Driving into Durban on the N3, an earlier crash is still causing a delay. The crashing by Paradise Valley. Traffic queuing coming in from the Pinetown side. Pietermaritzburg down through Camperdown and Cato Ridge. That section looking okay both ways. Cape Town's been another collision on the N2 out of town this morning. It's just before the R300, so that's slow from the airport. M3 still jam-packed and Stanshire through to Bishop's Court, and a collision on the N1 into town just before the Kuiberg interchange, keeping pressure on from Plattercliff Hill. And just a reminder that the whole Tableview, Bloberg, Parklands area under real pressure. Roadworks on the Bloberg Road to the refinery. No lights on Marine Drive at Sunset Beach. That whole sort of area around Bayside Junction, around Dolphin Beach, heavily congested even at this hour. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
We are going to Durban when Bafana face Benin in the FIFA 2026 World Cup qualifiers. On Saturday, 18 November at the Moses Mabhida Stadium. Gates open at 12 p.m. and tickets are available for 50 Rand for adults and 20 Rand for children at Ticket Pro. Come dressed in your national colors to support Bafana to win prizes. If you are not in Durban, catch the game on SABC 1 at 3 p.m. Also available on sabcsport.com.
SAFM invites you to our inaugural public lecture, delivered by the former Chief Justice, Mogoeng. The theme of the lecture is constitutionalism and upholding the rule of law in South Africa. Has corruption and malfeasance eroded the moral fabric of the democratic dispensation? The lecture will take place on the 29th of November 2023 at the SABC M1 Studios in Johannesburg. Secure your seat by emailing us at info@safm.co.za.
SAFM, leading the conversation. Mediated conversation on SAFM.
Continue your mediated conversation around transformation in the commercial agriculture industry. Wandile Seklobo is the lead economist at AgBiz, at the Agricultural Business Chamber. Wandile, good morning to you and thank you for your time this morning. It would seem that there's a sense of frustration at the slow pace of change. Is there any way to remove some of the obstacles to the changes that we've been discussing?
Good morning, Stephen. I think what you are facing this morning, you are grappling with a country of two agricultures. And I think there are easier ways or effective ways at which we could look at. I mean, the first one, Stephen, we must appreciate that to the point about, firstly, land, that both Swiso and Malapane had raised. The state does sit with roughly about 2.5 million hectares of land that it has bought somewhere between 2006 up until to today and never really transferred that with title deeds or some long-term tradable leases to black beneficiaries. I think we can do something by moving that and making sure that we transfer it effectively. And I pretty much liked the point that Malapane was saying, which he was saying, look, to succeed in agriculture, you do need a bit of scale. Because then that means that instead of now working on land reform where we take a certain piece of land, put as many people as we can in that land, we can look at saying better few but better and build this new crop of the commercial black farmers on that. And I think the secondary part that you want to look at, some form of incubation for some of the players that will be coming into the sector is an effective stuff to look at. And I think there is already step that is happening on the financing. The department and the commercial banks are looking at the blended finance instrument. We are participating on that as the chamber, and I do think that can be widened and it will be effective on resolving some of these challenges that we're facing as far as transformation. And there are examples, Stephen, of some of the successes that have been done in certain corners, like in the beef industry. You have the Semi Group in the Free State, you have PALS in Ceres. These are all things that we can study to say what is leading to some element of success on them, and how do we widen them into scale. And I do think that with those measures, we could begin to see some bit of progress in transformation. But I must state that with regards to land reform, there's really been some marginal improvement, because now we are not at 9% that people usually talk about. In that 30% target that the ANC had put back then, we are now, according to our numbers at Stellenbosch University, we're sitting at about 25% of that. That's not something to celebrate because, I mean, it's nearly 30 years now and we're far from there. But I do think that the benefit could come if that land is in full production. Then we wouldn't be stuck with the current situation where black farmers, on average, make up less than 10% of the commercial output in South Africa's agriculture and the food production.
Is one of the issues here a sort of concentration and maybe an over-concentration of entities that actually engage in commercial farming? I mean, let me use a slightly strange example. If the ownership of ZZ2, the huge tomato farm in the north of the country, had to change and suddenly, was bought by a group of black entrepreneurs, wouldn't that one move probably change dramatically our figures around black ownership?
No, I don't think so, Stephen, that is an issue. Remember, the key thing it is in why we are even engaging in agriculture or in any of these industries in South Africa and promoting them is because they have to resolve for us about three major problems, which is the low growth in rural South Africa, rising unemployment, and of course then the issues of inequality. So changing only hands in some of the parcels doesn't really create much extra growth and extra jobs. So it has to be, you're dealing with restorative justice and economic growth. What I think we should be doing firstly is to say, where do we have capacity for expansion that we're currently underutilizing? And then we move with that, because you do need some of these entities that do exist in a value chain, because they play as your anchor and they provide much needed services on joining everybody into the value chain. And I must also state one thing here, Stephen, because there is a sense that in South Africa's agriculture, most of the farms, they are big, it's these large scale white commercial farmers. But I mean, if you look closely in the data, And this comes from some of our work, status says, utilizing status says census data of 2017. You realize that roughly about half of South African farms, you could consider them small or medium scale, in a sense that their gross income is actually less than 2 million rands. And those are both white and as well as black farmers. So the concentration isn't as many people typically make. The one thing, though, that I would say, which usually increases the transaction cost of the people immensely and end up distorting the improvement of the black farmers into participating in value chains and value addition, is also the fact that there's a very weak infrastructure. Municipalities, roads, and all of these things that are failing. Because then if you have a scale and you are a big entity, you are able to maintain to an extent some of your roads have certain trucks. But if you are a medium scale or a new entrant, you depend on some of this public infrastructure, which the municipalities and the others across South Africa, they literally failing. So it's a combination of these things, Stephen. Some are within the Department of Agriculture and others are outside of that department. But all of them, if they work effectively, they begin to assist and see the sector progressing.
Wandile Sehlobo, thank you very much indeed. As you can hear, the lead economist at the Agricultural Business Chamber. My thanks also to Malapane Tamaga, the agricultural economist at the African Farmers Association of South Africa. And starting us off today, Dr. Siviso Nzumbele, special advisor to the Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, Toko Didiza. Kathy is next. We, of course, will see you tomorrow from Dupe, Stanza, Zelma, myself. Look after yourself. You with SFM, leading the conversation. It's Tuesday morning. It's 9 o'clock.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Thank you, Stephen. In your top stories, that's SA to release job numbers and a second suspect nabbed for the Loison Kohla murder. This is SAFM News. A very good morning. I am Luyanda Maume. Statistics South Africa is expected to release the quarterly labor force survey today. South Africa's official unemployment rate for the second quarter was 32.6% from 32.9% in the previous quarter. Some observers say they are not expecting a significant number of jobs created in the third quarter of the year.